How's everybody doing today?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good,
Excellent.
thank you, Mayor.
Classic Monday.
Okay, we are live on YouTube and we are recording. So proceed at
Wonderful.
will.
Well, welcome everyone. We're calling this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. And we're starting with a best practices presentation by Attorney Paul Kosnick. But before we get started with that, we're going to do a roll call. Kelly, if you would please do that, that would be wonderful.
Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper,
Here.
Trustee Weigert,
Here.
Trustee Bierma,
Here.
Trustee Lashley, Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here. So I believe that we do have a quorum present, and Trustee Lashley and Trustee Barella, this is most likely an update, something they've already experienced a bit. So hopefully they'll be joining us soon, but Attorney Paul Kosnick, I turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so Trustee Weigert's already heard a lot of this in a series of different work sessions. And so it will be a refresher for him, but hopefully for you guys, this will be helpful, the new trustees. And I guess I'll just start with a brief intro of myself, since I haven't met all of you. I was hired by the town in December of 18. And I have been working with my current partner, Duke Eggleston, here in Durango for just over 5 years. Prior to that, I was counsel for La Plata County. And that was about 7 or 8 years or so. And prior to that, I worked in Cortez, but originally from all over the East Coast. But I went to school in Vermont mainly, and moved here in 2006. Is when I moved to this area.
Vermont too.
Where are you from?
I went to school in Vermont.
Oh, UVM.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I went to Vermont Law School, and so lived down by the New Hampshire border for several years. So anyway, interesting. So, and I have 2 kids. I'm in my office right now because nobody else is in this building, so you won't see them pop in, which is nice for me. So today, kind of what I'd like to do is I probably don't have time to go through all of this, and there will probably be recurring questions that come up, throughout your terms. And so I just want to kind of give a basic overview of some of the key issues that I think the trustees, deal with. And so I'm going to start that off with a discussion kind of on open meetings, because that comes up all the time. And so there's a difference between a public meeting and a noticed meeting. And the main difference, so you could have a public meeting, and a public meeting is where the members of the public have a right to participate. And that right exists if there's going to be more than 2 trustees discussing what I'll just generally refer to as town business. So if there's 2 trustees talking about town business, that's fine. The public doesn't have a right to participate. But as soon as that third one participates, then, and I guess this, what just popped up on your screen there is going to be discussion on liability, and that's coming up next. So you don't have to start flipping through that yet, Lisa. So once you have that third person participating in the conversation, the public has a right to participate. So just be conscious of that whenever you're discussing things. And a meeting is everything from, a casual conversation on the street to your formal meetings to emails, phone calls. Those are all meetings. So you just have to be conscious. You can email, 1 trustee about something, but don't add a third in there. And that includes not forwarding messages to a third. So that seems to come up a lot with elected officials thinking, I'm only technically emailing 1 person. If you start sending around a series of emails, that's what's called a serial meeting. And so that also would be a public meeting once that third person becomes involved. it's not a meeting if you're just discussing, you're casually, at a friendly house party, or you're discussing even something unrelated to town business. So say you want to talk about oil and gas regulations, that has nothing to do really with the town of Silverton. So you'd be able to, three of you can go to some event, and it would not be necessarily a public meeting. Yeah, Trustee Wigert has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Kosnick. I appreciate you talking with the new, and I'm happy to attend this. Something that always seems to come up is more than 3 trustees wanting to attend a planning commission meeting. How are we protected in a situation like that, or is that even allowed?
It is allowed. It's a good question. So it's already a public meeting, the planning commission meetings, but it would have to be, if you go to that 4th person, then it would need to be noticed under the Board of Trustees regular noticing protocols. So that would be the difference. If just 3 of the trustees want to attend a planning commission meeting, they're welcome to do that. You get that 4th person involved, then it needs to be noticed the way a normal Town of Silverton trustee meeting would be noticed. So you kind of have dual noticing, because you're already noticing the planning commission, but.
And Administrator Ryder, do you know, is that something that we already do when we post for our planning commission meetings? Are those noticed as a normal trustee meeting, or that would have to be a situation where we plan in advance and get approval for something like that?
I think Mr. Ryder, you're muted.
Trustee Wiegert, it's not been something that we do as a matter of course. But interesting that if there is 4, yeah, it'd be something to give a heads up to me and we would post it accordingly.
It seems like that's something we may just need to do. There were 4 at the last meeting for at least the first 20 minutes or so.
And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to back out of that meeting as soon as I noticed that we had 4 trustees there. That was one of the reasons I left. And yeah, just curious as to, because that's come up in years past as well, where we already have 2 trustees at the meeting, and okay, a 3rd wants to attend, maybe a 4th shows up for something that they're interested in, and now we have 4 trustees at a meeting. So thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I've been work out details afterwards on how that exactly would be posted, like what type of meeting and what the wording might be, but we'll do that. I do like Mayor Furman's idea that maybe we just post planning commission meetings, however that's done for the Board of Trustees, as a regular event, so we don't accidentally miss something.
I agree. I think that would be wise. If that's going to come up once in a while, just regularly post it, and I'll work with you on that.
Okay.
Paul, is it a distinguishing factor if some of the trustees are participating as or attending as audience only and not participants?
No, because you're actually still going to have 4 there present at the meeting, and it's really just the presence at the meeting that then triggers the noticing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions on that one? Any more? No. Okay, but those are great questions, because it also will come up. Say there's other regularly scheduled meetings, and just as Trustee Wigert just mentioned, he did a great thing by noticing that there were 3 people at that one meeting, and he decided, maybe I shouldn't be here. So that's just something to be conscious of. It might come up again in other forms and other meetings. So, I talked about the emails, and so just be careful with your emails. The other part of open meetings is also the open records, and so there's a right to for the public to request disclosure of your emails. And I suggest if you're going to be emailing about something related to your performance as a trustee, you should do that from the Silverton address if you can. Otherwise, it just gets messy when there's a request and you're emailing maybe from a private email address, and then somebody has to go in and search through all your private emails, and you probably just don't want that to happen. So if you can, my suggestion would be to use the Silverton account And then, you know that all your work stuff is being done from that one account. The other thing, just to, that fits under the open meetings is executive sessions. So that's where there might be a need for conversation without the public present. It's a statutory thing. There's 6 or 5 reasons in there that allow for an executive session, and that was in that memo that I sent you guys, so you can kind of look at those. I think the main reasons that are typically used are for legal advice from the attorney, for negotiation purposes. It's, for the purchase of property. I think those are the main ones to be used, but you just remember that. So if you're ever in a meeting and there's something where you're worried about, hey, if I talk about this is going to create liability for the town or something like that, just remember that that's available and out there. It does you have to have a motion for it where the board has to vote in favor of it. So, that's, just keep that in mind as well. And it's very important, when you have an executive session, to follow all the very specific protocols, and the mayor was provided kind of the outline for that, for when an executive session is called, because if the executive, if all the protocols aren't followed, then, all of that recorded information is subject to disclosure. You just kind of mess up on one thing, then, it could be the public could be listening to everything, or have a right to listen to everything. So just keep that in mind. Okay, that was a very quick open meetings and open records discussion. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to the presentation? Okay, great. So like I said, things will pop up along the way, and I'm sure you have more specific questions. And I guess one thing I did want to highlight too, in my intro that I forgot to do, but I work for you guys, and by you guys, I mean the board as a whole. So I take my direction from the board, and generally, I might ask some annoying questions during meetings, but I want to have clear direction, from the board in general, because I don't work for any individual on the board. I don't take direction from any individual on the board. It's the board as a whole that I take direction from. But with that said, there might be individual questions that come up along the way that relate to, hey, there's this thing on the agenda. I've talked to so-and-so. Does that present a conflict? That might be just a specific question that, comes up that you would have the ability just to call me and ask me, but you don't have necessarily the right to call me and say, hey, can you research, what a special improvement district is and how that would fit into the town? That would be a board decision as a whole if the board wanted me to do that. So that makes sense to everybody? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Lisa, do you want to move on to the presentation? May pop that up on the screen, please? Great, thank you. So I'm just going to try to go over here fairly quickly, an overview of public official liability, because I think that's something that always comes up of concern, obviously, to the individuals, but also, the town in general. And it's a requirement that, that you guys understand, what the possible liability is of the town through the actions that you guys make. And so, again, questions will pop up all the time, and this is just intended to be a general overview. Okay, Lisa, next slide, please. So during this presentation, I'm just going to kind of briefly go over, what the sources are of liability for the town, how the town has what's called sovereign immunity, which is immunity from liability. There's also insurance, just like any business, from liability. Talk about a little bit about the areas of liability, how the town could get in trouble, and run through some scenarios at the end if we have time here. Hey, Lisa, next one, please. Okay. So there's two different main sources of liability. The first is kind of state law claims. So when we talk about state law claims, those are claims that are brought under Colorado law, whether it be statutory law or common law. And they would be brought in the local courts here. So it would be brought in San Juan County, whether district or county court, depending on the claim. The different types of claims that could be brought under state law, you have torts claims. So that's where, maybe the town is doing something and there's a claim of negligence or slander, or those types of things are tort claims. You have contract claims. That's, I think everybody understands, breach of contract, what that is. There would be injunctive claims. That's where there's a claim for a demand for the town to maybe stop doing things, to cease doing what they're doing. There's declaratory relief, which is where somebody asks a judge and says the town, what is the status of the town's code? What does this really mean when there's a dispute over what the code says? And then there's also appeals, the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court in Colorado. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. We also have federal law claims. These are kind of the bigger claims that could be brought in federal district court. Federal district court would be, although they're trying to push for more stuff in Durango, mainly in the Front Range in Denver would be a federal law claim and where that's brought. Those are the bigger claims, like I said, the violations of the US Constitution. So we're talking about violating in some ways freedom of speech and other associated Fifth Amendment rights. All those things would fall under the US constitutional claims. Another constitutional claim would also be the takings without just compensation. That comes up mostly, in a land use context when somebody feels that a decision was made and their property rights were taken without any compensation, but that's also a constitutional claim. And it arises a lot in employment practices claims. So we'll talk about that a little later on too. The next slide, Lisa, please. Good news is on state claims, there is the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act that provides certain protection from claims under the state law, and those are protections for governmental entities. What it means is that for certain claims, they can't even be brought. There's sovereign immunity. It's a bar to those claims. So that's definitely a good protection. That is a statutory protection. The one thing to really focus on is, as a town, it's important that the immunity is not waived. And so there's certain ways it could be waived. One is through contract, ordinance, or resolution. Another one would be if there's a continual dangerous condition of a building or a roadway. So those are things, if the town knew that there is the stop sign was missing and, they just let it be for a long time, could be a dangerous condition of the roadway. Water and sanitation also has its own exclusions and exemptions from sovereign immunity. All these still require that someone bringing the claim proves their case, but there's not a bar, meaning that they could still prove their case and there could be liability in these areas for the town. Another good news is there's limits of liability in statute, meaning there's not unlimited recovery for somebody bringing these claims. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. Okay, so as elected officials, you want to keep that immunity. And what's important is that the elected officials are always acting within the scope of the authority. So you're authorized to take certain actions under statute and under the code. And it's important just to make sure that you are acting within that authority. You're not going outside of it. For employees, it's important that they're acting within their job description, not going outside of what their job entails, because if they do, then there could be a waiver of that immunity. The other thing, there's a waiver from immunity if there's a willful and wanton action, meaning that somebody is taking a purposeful action that leads to a claim. They have recognized that action is creating something that's dangerous, and they're doing it recklessly without regard for any consequences. So that's really going to happen when you're stepping outside of the authority as an employee or an elected official, and you're just kind of careless and reckless, and that whatever you're doing is going to create damage. Then there could be a waiver of the immunity. Does anybody have any questions on sovereign immunity and its protections and? Okay. Next slide, please, Lisa. Those federal claims, the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act does not apply to them. So there is more of a risk of liability in those federal claims. There's also no monetary limit on any of the damages in, with federal claims. There is a possibility of attorney's fees being awarded to a prevailing person bringing these claims. And it's something just to be very careful of. When we go on with this discussion, we'll talk a little bit about procedural rights and both, from a substantive perspective and procedural, and those are just important things to follow, that it's very important for the public and applicants to have process, or else it could lead to some of these federal claims. And the other area, as I mentioned, is the employment area. And that's something that is very important for the trustees to understand, kind of what liability presents itself when dealing with employees. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. Okay, if you are faced with a possible claim, say you're on the street and you see something, somebody comes up to you and says, hey, an employee did this, I'm going to sue you. So I'm going to sue the town. So you need to, at that point, immediately cease communications and say, okay, well, I need to refer this to both Administrator Ryder and the attorney, and I can no longer talk to you about these issues. So that's very important. If you feel like a claim's arisen, or somebody is stating that they have a claim against the town or an employee or any of that, then immediately say, hey, I really can't talk to you anymore. Sorry, you're gonna have to talk to the administrator or the attorney about this. And then once that communication starts with the administrator and the attorney, then we provide notice to CIRSA. CIRSA, as you guys may know, is the insurance arm for municipalities and for the town. And CIRSA then will look at the coverage and say, hey, okay, you would be covered under this claim. And, we're either going to let you handle it, we're going to hire our own counsel for it. But it's very important, because if that notice isn't provided, then, the town could be stuck with any kind of award of a judgment that arises from that claim. Okay, next one, Lisa, please. So I don't know how familiar you are yet with the town's organizational charts. I think this was from a past presentation where we were talking also about organizational charts, but really, I think it's important for the trustees to just know that immediately under the trustees is the administrator and the attorney. And it's very important that, a lot of the communications should roll through those two people, either one, depending on what the situation is. But really keeping that chain of command, just like, the law enforcement, military, whatever it is very important to recognize and understand, because if you kind of step outside of that chain of command, then you are kind of going outside the authority that's been provided to the trustees, and it just makes things messy, and it's difficult to manage just from a practical perspective too. So anytime there's issues, then you're talking a lot of times to the administrator about, hey, how's this employee doing, or whatever the issues are. It's all going through the administrator. Stay out of hiring and firing. That's very important for the trustees. So some of the dangers with employment matters are going to be, harassment claims. That's pretty straightforward. You can imagine what those are. Quasi-contractual claims. So, that's just as simple as something, maybe a trustee saying, hey, Joe, don't worry, you'll be fine here. What you did wasn't that bad, and, you'll have a job or whatever. It's just something that can create a contract, just something that simple, at least an allegation of a contract. So just be careful when talking about employees and their work. Try to avoid it the best you can, if possible. And if anything does come up, again, talk to the administrator. Some of the other federal claims, Section 1983. So some of these claims are are more things to be worried about, if somebody's getting terminated or other actions like that, where, if they're from a protected class, you just have to be careful about a lot of these things. So it takes a lot of, thought by the administrator before taking actions with the employees. And it's just important for the trustees to recognize that. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. So quasi-judicial matters. Those are going to be matters that impact an individual or even a small group of people. An example of a quasi-judicial matter would be possibly a new marijuana application, because you're looking at an application that has been submitted by an individual or small group of people, and you're looking at the facts behind that application and trying to apply the law to those facts. So when the board sits as a quasi-judicial matters, they're almost playing the role of a judge. And so you're looking really at the rights of a single individual. A lot of the land use matters, those are going to be quasi-judicial matters. So when you have those, there's heightened need to follow the procedures, because you're impacting somebody's rights. And so when we talk about procedure, we're talking about procedural due process. That's making sure, really just as simple as, hey, there's a right to be heard of the people that have interest in that application. Making sure that it's noticed, making sure that there is an ability for a fair process provided for them to provide comments. And that includes, both the applicant itself and maybe other members of the community that are immediately affected by that application. So it's very, very important to remember that, because, when say an application is approved, it's also affecting potentially other people's rights, meaning, a neighbor or another citizen that has a real interest in that application. So those people also need a right to be heard on those types of quasi-judicial matters. So again, it's important to follow the meeting procedures and the protocol when dealing with a quasi-judicial matter. It's also important in keeping a really clean record in these matters, because, if there's ever a challenge to them, what the next judge will do, the judge at the district court level, would look back at the record and see if the record supports the decision that the Board of Trustees made. So that means you can't just say, okay, this looks great, let's approve it. You have to state a basis on the record in these types of matters that say, and it could be stated through what's been submitted to you also, through the staff reports and those materials, but it must be a part of the record, the rationale for the decision that the Board of Trustees made. If it's not included in the record, then, if challenged at the next level, the judge might look at it and say, okay, this was what's called an arbitrary and capricious action, meaning there was no basis for the decision that the board made, and it has to go back to the Board of Trustees for another consideration. Another concern with quasi-judicial matters is ex parte communications. That means when you have a quasi-judicial matter, you can't go out and do your own research on it. You can't go out and talk to people, or look on the internet, or whatever you want to do to try to feel prepared. You can't do that, because then you're considering things that are outside of the record. You have to base your decision solely on what is being presented to you during the hearing process. That's just a matter of fairness to the applicant and to the public. And so just be careful with that. If there's specific questions, say you see something on the agenda and you would think, oh, it'd be great to know what an engineer would think about that. We'll then email Administrator Ryder or call him or meet with him and say, hey, this would be helpful for me making my decision. So then Administrator Ryder can collect that material and put it part of the record, and all of the trustees would be able then to consider the exact same thing on that decision.
Can I ask a clarifying question there?
Sure.
So the decision that you're making has to be based on the information that was publicly presented, but that doesn't mean that you can't Google something or research something or ask an expert. You just can't consider that unless that conversation or that research ends up becoming part of the public record and part of the process in an official manner. Is that correct?
That's a good question. I'd say no, you cannot Google anything, because you are then, say you Google, I'll just use the engineering one. You know, how big does the pipe have to be for this project? And you Google that, and then you could be basing your decision on, you know, that answer. And so not every trustee has had the same information about that current project. Yes, every trustee, you know, has their own background, their own understanding of things, and they could bring that to the meeting, but they just can't do independent research, you know, including Googling stuff before the meeting. I would say though, if, you know, again, if you want the administrator to do that and provide as part of the packet that everybody's receiving, then you could do that. Does that make sense?
Not really. So honestly, because I think if you Googled something and you find out and you do your own research and it seems to conflict with the information available, then you bring that to Trustee Ryder. Trustee Ryder can then clarify. It seems that the suggestion not to do anything in your own time to become more knowledgeable on an issue is very counterintuitive. And I just want to distinguish that I completely understand that we can't use that outside information in making a decision unless it's been incorporated, but it seems weird to not allow any type of conversation to learn more about something. Trustee Harper, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so what I'm understanding is we are being discouraged from doing our own homework. Is that?
No, you should have the staff do your homework. Meaning the staff, that's why it's really important for staff to be presenting a clear idea of what the application is and what the project is. Now, I will add, Mayor Furman, there's nothing preventing you from doing general, trying to learn more about a general subject. However, it gets difficult when you start crossing the line into that specific project, if that makes sense. So, I mean, if you're trying to understand more about a general subject, then I'd say, yeah, go for it. But once you start bleeding into that specific project, you're not providing the applicant with the understanding of what you're doing to prepare for that. So you're doing something that the applicant is not also getting a process and understanding what you're doing. Not satisfactory, but to stay on, there's a slippery slope involved there, once you start researching into an individual project.
Okay.
I have kind of maybe a suggestion as to how that might happen. So if we are researching something and the board has made a previous decision, it's public record available in the newspaper. But the decision that was made by the board is maybe not included in our staff research. The most appropriate thing would probably do to then bring that piece of information that you found that isn't being presented to the whole board to Administrator Ryder, so that the entire board would then have that information to be presented as part of the issue. Would that be a good way to handle something like that?
Yeah, that would be an excellent way of handling it. Thank you. Yes, that's okay. Exactly what you would do. So I'll move to, there's some examples at the end, and maybe we could get to some of those and hopefully run through those, and maybe it'll make a little more sense of why the procedural due process is very important. Next slide, please, Lisa. Legislative matters, that there's more of ability here to go do your independent research, to go talk to people, to go around the community, talk to the citizens and find out, what their thoughts are on these certain things. So there's a statutory process here for adoption of most legislative matters. So we're not talking, the process has already been laid out in statute. Public comment is often associated with most of the legislative matters. One of the things you just obviously, the town can't adopt legislation and whatever it feels important. There has to be statutory authority to adopt that legislation. And that's why the town is a statutory town, meaning that any of its authority derives from statute. There's the statutory process also, incorporates the substantive due process. And it's just important when, adopting legislation that there's a concentration on, the exact language of it, because if you don't have that down, then it's just subject to future challenge. And so you want to try to avoid that. So any questions on legislative matters? Again, more ability to talk to citizens, do your research, figure things out before, coming to the meeting and then talking about it. Okay, next slide, please. So we already talked a little bit about this. We talked about appeals. The appeals of board decisions, they go to the district court. We talked about how the record's very important to avoid an arbitrary and capricious decision, to make sure that whatever rationale is included in the board's decision as part of the record. Again, the record could be what's stated orally, or it could be what's submitted by the board, applicant, public, whoever. Legislation that is challenged, there's a statutory process for that. Again, one of the key things on challenging that is making sure that the process has been followed as laid out in statute, the noticing, all that stuff. Okay, next slide, please. All right, conflicts of interest. This comes up a lot, as you can imagine, in small governments. And the real important conflict of interest that comes up is if there is a financial interest. If you have financial interest in what's being proposed, then what you need to do is talk to Administrator Ryder, talk to me and say, hey, I can't vote on this issue. And if you think that a conflict is going to arise. Again, same thing, economic interest. If there's an economic interest in the proposal, you stand to gain, you stand to lose from it, whatever it is. If you have an economic interest, you just can't participate in that item. If you have a personal or private interest, this comes up maybe more with family members or things like that. Maybe you don't really have an economic interest or financial interest. On those, you're going to want to examine exactly what your relationship is, exactly what's being considered, whether it's a legislative, an application for a quasi-judicial thing. It just all depends on those. There's a little more leniency to allow a trustee to participate in those, but a lot of those are going to be based on, how you feel if you could fairly deal with that interest. Gifts. So this is a constitutional requirement that no trustee is allowed to receive gifts. And I didn't write down the exact amount. It keeps going up every year, but somewhere around like $60 in a year. So it's not very high. And that's in the form of whether it's cash or dinner, a present, whatever it is. I mean, yeah, gifts from friends and family are fine, but if you can't start receiving gifts from people outside of who you normally would have, say, received a gift from before you were a trustee. So just important to keep in mind. That includes, everybody from, comping your trip or whatever it is. Just be careful of that. There's certain disclosures on gifts you would have to make to the state in certain cases. I won't go into that in too much detail right now. The one thing, you always, as a trustee, you just want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Meaning, if you think it's going to look bad, if you make a decision or you do something, you should probably talk to Administrator Ryder or myself first and say, hey, this came up. Does this, do you see an appearance of impropriety based on, this fact scenario? So again, like I was saying, these are things that are going to pop up along the way. You'll probably have questions about them. It's typically not black and white. It's typically not like, hey, I invested in this project here and now it's being heard this week. It's going to be more gray than that. So it's again, just something to keep your eye out for, and you see something on the agenda, raise the issue to one of us prior to that meeting. Okay,
I have a question.
sure.
I'm not sure I'm clear on the difference between the financial interest and the economic interest. I would imagine that if you're in anywhere in that terrain, you would just bring it up, but I'm not sure I see the difference.
Yeah, so a direct financial is if I think it's the same. I think it's really if you have a, I'll have to look a little closer at what the case law is that distinguishes the two. I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
I can offer an example.
Okay,
One would be if you have a contract personally that you're getting paid in connection with, and another one would be you own a business that's bound to benefit from a decision. One would be a direct financial, and the other one would be economic.
thank you. That's exactly on there. Yes, if you're going to make a decision that's going to benefit you as a owner of something, or your family even too, you have to be careful of. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, we kind of, since I started this out with this discussion, we'll just move on past transparency, but that includes, the open records, open meetings, public meetings, executive sessions. So we talked about that already. So we can move on to the next one, please. Okay, so I just did a couple scenarios here. We can go through a couple of them if you want, but I think they're helpful and to bring up. So in my first scenario here, you have a bartender tells the trustee that the town employee has been going to the local bar and talking about what bad decisions the board is making. Bartender tells trustee what employee said and that the employee was bad news. So here, I won't call on you guys. I think with these questions were presented in a different context before, but the trustee, has different options here, but should they confront the employee? That's probably not the best thing. Again, looking at that chain of command, ask the administrator to fire the employee. Probably not. That's not the decision of one trustee. That's the decision in the end of the administrator. So talk to the administrator. That's probably what should happen. If you hear something around town that an employee has done something that might not be ideal, then bring that to administrator or writer. Okay, any questions on that one? All right, let's move to the next one, Lisa, please. Okay, so in this one, the board has a scheduled hearing on a request to build a new hotel. The trustee is confronted on the street by an angry neighbor who talks about how the infrastructure cannot support the proposed project. So if that comes up, then the trustee will say, hey, this is going to be a quasi-judicial matter because you're going to be dealing with a specific application, and you shouldn't be talking to the neighbor about that. Say, okay, I appreciate the concerns. You should present them to administrator Ryder. He can make it part of the record when the hearing's held, or show up at the hearing and make it part of the record. But if you start engaging that person in the conversation, then you're having those ex parte communications. And if an applicant finds out about that, then the applicant will say, hey, that's an ex parte communication. That's a clear no, and you should be recused from voting on this issue. Okay, next, if the trustee goes home and researches engineering of infrastructure, again, going to the mayor's previous question, unfortunately, that's also a no. If you want more information on that, you should say, hey, Administrator Ryder, I'm concerned about the possible engineering of the infrastructure for this project. Can you please include that as part of the staff presentation to the board? Next one is the trustee informs another trustee about the information and says the applicant can't be trusted. On this, again, this is something that two trustees should not be talking about. This is, although, it wouldn't be a public meeting, it wouldn't be a notice meeting, they should not be sharing ideas on quasi-judicial matters before a actual hearing. Next scenario, another trustee votes to deny the project because the applicant moved to town from California. So when you're reviewing these quasi-judicial projects and applications, you're looking at the facts presented to you and whether those facts meet the law, mainly the Silverton Town Code. So I don't think, and if there's something in there that would support a denial of a vote because the guy moved from California, I would be very surprised. I don't think that exists. So in this case, you can't deny a project because you don't like somebody, or they're from California, or whatever the reason and rationale might be. You can't look at the individual presenting the application, but instead, what are the facts behind it? And do they support approval or denial? And that's what you're solely looking at, not any of the background kind of noise on, about the individual or the group of people. So another trustee owns a plumbing company that has been guaranteed the plumbing work in the new hotel. Okay, again, this is just the economic interest. So that person would have to be recused. Another trustee is a family friend of the applicant. So again, this would be something, it depends on how close of a family friend it was. And you'd probably want to talk to Administrator Ryder or myself about that and see whether you'd be able to vote on it. Quasi-judicial matters are generally a little more sensitive. So probably the suggestion would be often to lean away from being able to vote on it if you thought it was going to affect your vote. Any questions on that one? Okay. Next one, please, Lisa. Okay, this one's going with the public meeting, public notice idea. So there's 3 trustees are having lunch discussing town issues. A citizen hears them and asks to join them. That citizen would have a right to join the conversation and sit with you at your lunch table. Another trustee sits up or shows up and sits down. Then you have a public meeting that's supposed to be noticed. So that 4th person shouldn't be sitting down and talking about it too. Here, the restaurant owner tells them that lunch is on the house. All the trustees sitting at the table. So again, potentially if it's a really low amount, okay, but I would just tend to stay away from this as a elected official and say, no, thank you. I'm very grateful, but can't do that because my attorney told me not to. So try to stay away from those scenarios. Okay, next one, please, Lisa. Okay, so the board has, in this scenario, a regularly scheduled meeting. During the trustee update, a trustee talks about proposed state legislation and proposes to draft and send a letter in support. I mean, this comes up frequently. And so I'm going to finish up with this one. And then another trustee makes a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of taking the other trustee to the woodshed. Okay, so first of all, there's no basis to go into an executive session to discuss personnel, or I should say personal matters between trustees, or even the appointment of somebody that's going to be on a board or commission. There's no basis for that, so that cannot happen. During the trustee update, if it wasn't specifically on the agenda that the board was going to be making a decision on something, the board can't make a decision on that item. So you can discuss, part of your updates, say, hey, this is what's going on, or hey, I'd like to next time, propose a letter in support of this specific legislation. That's great, but before a letter can be approved or anything like that, it needs to be specifically on the agenda and noticed to the public. Make sense? Okay. Next one, please, Lisa.
I had a question there.
Sure.
Something that seems to have come up in the past. I'm sorry. I guess I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. If it comes back to me, I'll ask you.
Okay. Okay, scenario 5. Trustee sees a friend at the store. Friend tells the trustee that he's pissed off because the town knocked down his fence. Trustee tells the friend that the town will pay for a new fence, and that trustee will talk with the employee. So those are both issues there. you can talk to that person about, their fence being knocked down and get, more facts and then bring them to Administrator Ryder. But, telling them that an individual trustee does not have the right to tell a citizen who would be outside of their authority that they can take some certain action on behalf of the town. So they can't say, yeah, we'll rebuild your fence or we'll give you money or whatever. You just can't make any of those commitments. So you want to stay away from that. And then again, you wouldn't want to talk to the trustee, or to the employee specifically about the incident. You can mention it to talk with Administrator Ryder and say, hey, I heard, so-and-so knocked down a fence. Do you know anything about it? Or, do you need to talk to him or whatever it is, but not directly with the employee, should you be discussing those types of things. Okay, last slide, please, Lisa. Now, this is a tricky one, but a trustee owns property management business, which includes VRBO management. Town is amending zoning for VRBOs and creating regulations. So this is going to be a legislative item. Can the trustee vote on this? So there's been opinions on this, and it says no, a trustee cannot vote on this because there is too much of an interest involved in that vote. And it's a very difficult thing when you're talking about short-term rentals, VRBOs, those types of actions, zoning, and you are in the hospitality business already. Those are things that a lot of mountain communities have had to face, and there's many decisions out there saying no, it was proper for, or the trustee had to recuse themselves from those types of decisions, even though those are legislative items.
Can I ask a clarifying question here?
Sure, I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but go.
I think you will in this case. So an example of something, so a broader example than this one is the ADU policy or ordinance that went in front of the Planning Commission last week to permit ADUs under more circumstances in R1 zoning in Silverton. So let's say for this hypothetical example, all seven of the Planning Commission members, or let's say it's us, all seven of us own residential properties zoned R1, and all of us would benefit from something like this. We all have a direct conflict. What happens in that scenario?
So in your scenario, the only you'd benefit because you live in that zone, and you would benefit. These people would benefit because they potentially could have an ADU. Is that?
Yeah, and so if you want to exaggerate the hypothetical, like 2 or 3 of us could potentially be in the process of building ADUs based on this, or be ready to build an ADU based on the updated ordinance, while the rest of us are not, but still would potentially have the option. How do we resolve that in a small town?
So if you have, I think in your scenario, you're just saying this zoning would benefit me when I'm making a vote in you as a residential property owner. In that case, it's going to be very difficult to require recusal on that one, because if you extend that out further, then you're going to be benefiting or not benefiting from every single vote you make in a zoning perspective. So, that case, I think it would be hard pressed to say you'd have to recuse yourself from that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, I mean, this is an interesting example because 3 of the people, maybe 4 on this board have hospitality related businesses. So anything related to VRBOs or short-term rentals would potentially require more than half of us recusing ourselves. So I'm just curious, at what point do we become ineffective on certain types of decisions, and what happens if that's the case?
So my purpose of raising this one was, I know it's an issue, and so I just want everybody to start thinking about it. I don't want to give any kind of set answers on what that would entail right now, just because I'd like to explore it a little further. But yes, you're exactly right. It could hamstring the entire process if everybody has to half the board has to recuse themselves because of their interest in these types of things. But it's something that it's real, and Silverton's not the first community to have to deal with people in the hospitality industry that's voting on short-term rentals. It's come up a lot. So it's just something that to look at all the current decisions on, whether it's been required recusal or not, will be important.
Okay, and one other quick question about that is, at what point, obviously we should, as soon as we're aware of a potential conflict, we should note it. But to what extent do we remove ourselves from the discussion relative to just removing ourselves from the vote itself?
So the recommendation is always to remove yourselves from the discussion completely, and in a lot of cases, just step out of the room. It's not necessary. You could sit there and be quiet, but just if you're not going to participate in the discussion, there's probably not much purpose of just sitting there, and it just gives ammunition to somebody that wants to challenge it in the future. So that would be the suggestion, to just leave if you're going to review your cues, but you have a right to sit there too if you want. Great,
thank you.
Sure. So that was my last scenario. I kind of ran through that pretty quickly, and as I said, there's gonna be a lot coming up in in your terms. So I welcome more of these. If there's issues to the board wants to specifically talk about, I'd be glad to do that. So thanks for scheduling this, and I think I did it in an hour. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. With that, we will be ending this work session, and we appreciate your time. And we will now transition to our regular meeting. It is 6:59. Does anyone need a 1-minute break before we move into the regular meeting? Jess? Trustee Uyghur? Yeah, okay, so we'll take a 45-second break before we jump into the regular meeting.
Oh.
Jim and Becky, do you want to test your mics real quick?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Once I see Trustee Lashley and Trustee Barella back on, we will, well, there we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. It is 7:01, and we're going to call to order this Silverton Town Hall meeting on April 27th, and we will begin with a roll call. Kelly, if you would please do a roll call for our regular meeting.
She will be back in just a minute.
Sounds great.
Trustee Barella,
Here.
Trustee Harper,
Present.
Trustee Wager,
Here.
trustee Bierma,
Here.
I was like, where do we lose him? Trustee Lashley,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here. So I believe this evening Administrator Ryder will be leading us in the pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Administrator Ryder. And this evening, we are going to begin with the note that our protocols are still effective. We're still going to follow them, but we're going to skip reading them. We do have them in front of us, and in the event we need to call on them, I will call them out and read them if they're necessary. But I would ask that we continue to have as wonderful, productive, and collaborative meetings as our first couple of work sessions and meetings have been, and I look forward to working with everybody. With that, we can launch into the agenda, and I'm going to hand over the mic to Administrator Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I would first ask if the staff has no board revisions to the agenda, but I would ask the board if they do.
I do not.
Hearing none.
I do not.
Okay, seeing no hands, we'll go into public comment. As we did in the previous meeting, we've invited Jim Donovan, Becky Joyce, and Deanne Gallegos to give us an update on COVID-related issues. So I will turn it over to that group.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Jim Donovan here, Emergency Manager for San Juan County. Myself, Becky, and Deanne Gallegos will be giving you just a quick update, and also just really talking about the next phase in this ongoing incident. I'm sure everyone is curious kind of what that is going to be. If Lisa is able, if we're able to do screen sharing, I don't know if Lisa can
Yep, give me just a second and I'll get that
enable
going
that.
for you.
Yep. Okay, great. Let me see if, yep, okay. So what I'm gonna do is just do a quick, what's called situation report, and then talk a bit about testing and just some other elements. Then Deanne Gallegos is gonna go over some PIO communication pieces, and then Becky is gonna go over the newly released governor's executive order and the newly released state public health order, and how that is aligning with our next step in this process. So the first is just going over the current Colorado case summary. And there's currently 13,000 cases recorded in Colorado, 2,400 hospitalizations, 56 counties, 66,000 people tested, 706 deaths recorded to COVID-19, and 144 outbreaks. You can see on the map, I'm just going to kind of focus on the southwest part of the state. This has it broken down to case rates per 100,000 people, so it makes it a little easier to compare across geographic areas. But if you see my cursor, you can see San Juan County. We still are at 0. We did have a accidentally reported case that was San Juan County, Utah. We were able to get that cleared up. But we're still at 0 reported cases for our county. So if you look, you can see it's really us and Dolores are at no cases reported, but you can see all around that there are cases reported. So it's definitely very much within our area. And it's just important to know with these numbers, this is not indicating if it has existed here. This is really just going straight off of what has been reported through the system. And we will not necessarily know that for a while until there's some other types of testing that are more widespread available, but that's currently a national problem. So we're not going to address that here. I think it's just important to know that what are called community mitigation strategies have been very successful. And we've all heard the term flattening the curve. We can say for Silverton, San Juan County, we have sledgehammered the curve by keeping it where we are. But we need to realize with this, we can't stay in this situation forever. We're going to have to figure out how to basically coexist with this virus until there's a vaccine and some other potential tools. And that's what we're really talking about tonight. So we're talking about how we're going to open up basically our community back to commerce, back to getting somewhat back to normal. But the reality is it's just a new normal that we're dealing with. With this opening phase, we're going to be putting our community at more risk. And that's just something everybody needs to recognize, and also recognize what those risks are and why we are feeling like we are taking acceptable risk in this. We do feel that we can go into this next phase for really 4 separate pieces of information. We have currently prevented a surge hitting the regional medical system that's worked throughout our region. We now have testing in San Juan County. This is a piece that we have been requesting since the beginning of this event, but we have finally been able to acquire it. We have 2 types of tests, and just know that those are available. It still requires a person to get pre-screened to make sure that they're acceptable to get the testing done. We've also been able to build up our capacity on how to deal with the virus, getting our medical personnel trained up properly, and also the proper supplies to protect our medical personnel. Even 1 or 2 people who got hit by this could be really a very heavy impact on our system. So just a little more on the testing. The testing capability will enable us then to do basically more targeted quarantine, isolation, and case investigation. So that will enable us to basically kind of control the spread of the virus in our community. That's why we were really adamant about these previous community mitigation strategies. Without that testing, we really had to just use that sledgehammer approach. Now we can use a bit more of a fancy tool to do that. With this reopening, I want to make sure that the town is fully engaged in it. And the town has been, and John Ryder can expand on this, but the town has been very much engaged in figuring out ways to match our social distancing, but still opening up the town. So ideas of having picnic tables in the middle of Green Street, but still maintaining that social distancing. Today we talked about getting wash stations positioned around town so we can really encourage, when we do have visitors, we can encourage best practices. Another piece that we're working on is creating a joint town council meeting in mid-May to just bring both the Board of Commissioners together with the town council and just make sure everybody's on the same page. We did this, we've done this both for the Gold King incident and also the 416. And I think mid-May is a good, it's basically a good time for kind of evaluating that next phase. We've been operating in really 2-week operational periods. That kind of fits with the data from the virus. That's the kind of incubation period for the virus. And we'll continue to work on that tempo of that 2-week period. So now let me just turn it over to Deanne, and she'll talk a little bit about how we're working with the chamber and communicating with different business sectors. Deanne, are you on there?
I am. Yep.
All
Can
right.
you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yep. So transitioning my position, my role more into economic recovery, marketing efforts, business owner communications. So 3 weeks ago, we started a series of weekly Zoom conversations with the business owners. And then Wednesday, we're going to go into more work sessions to really talk about the nitty gritty of how we do go back into business with the current and future predicted regulations. So having the business owners brainstorm together in breakout sessions by industry, so we don't have 15 people recreating the wheel. We are all creating best practices. So we are going to continue those weekly sessions with the business community, and then just communicating with the folks at large. You know, this weekend we had to address the false positive from San Juan County, Utah, and then also let folks know what our process was with the public health order coming out of our public health department, that will be coming this week. So through that email, we are receiving lots of two-way communications, certain people's predicaments, questions, concerns, comments. That is an excellent form to have it in writing, to send it to the appropriate team member to get a solid answer and get it back, so that is happening. At the visitor center, we're receiving plenty of questions about is Ice Lakes available, to what are your regulations, to where can I camp in July. So we are receiving a well-rounded wealth of questions, comments, concerns to the visitor center as well. And then I have zeroed in on events and mid-March. So mid-March, when this conversation really started happening about COVID-19 crisis in this summer, event organizers, which I already had a solid relationship with, were reaching out two-way streets. So the way we're managing events through the OEM office is to work with them one-on-one. Each event is their own special circumstance and case. Most of these events are basically small businesses, so they're having to make budget decisions, travel plans, and what do they do with their own organization, right? So we've had conversations, of course, in May, the events have canceled, and then we are starting to see June events cancel, and now we're moving into July. So having a conversation with the 4th of July committee, and then Hard Rock 100 just got off the phone with Dale about an hour ago. He will be making his decision mid-May. He's holding steady until then. I spoke with Megan Finnessy with the August 1st date, same thing, holding steady, going to make her decision June 1st. And then Hundreds in the Hills, I had about an hour-long conversation with it today as well, and he will be making his decision June 1st. So most events are making their decision 6 to 8 weeks out. And basically the platform that I'm giving them as far as Office of Emergency Management, and then of course backing it up with Chamber, is it's their event and it's their decision. And we are here to work with them and to support them into making the appropriate decisions around how they can or cannot have their events. But we are all in a moment of flux. And so how can we predict July? There's pretty good indicators as to what July is going to be like, but how do we not know that there will be something positive happening, you know, in the world tomorrow? So it's being positive, supportive, and empowering them to make their own appropriate decisions, but also holding them responsible to, you know, making it in a timely manner for not only our community, but for their members. So we are working very tightly hand in hand with all event organizers. And we've been doing that since March. So it takes a lot of phone time. It takes a lot of one-on-one relationship time, but thankfully I've already created those relationships with these folks. And, you know, they are in flux within their own lives and their events, but that is kind of our stance, to support them and to just know that they will honor the policies, and then that's a two-way street. And that way we're entrusting them to be responsible event organizers.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Deanne. Now, Becky, are you on there? And Becky will really take it from here. And she's going to walk us through the next phase. I've got the timeline up. Hopefully everyone can see that, but we are moving into what's called the safer at home phase. And Becky Joyce.
Thanks. Thanks you guys for having us tonight. We were really excited to be able to inform you first after my commissioners. And we really wanted to include you and just acknowledge that you're really important stakeholders. And we wanted this to get out to you before it got out to town and you were needing to answer questions. So this is hot off the press. As you remember, around April 4th, we were looking at situations like New York, Italy, Spain, etc. And so we really made a very strict public health order. In a way, it was locked down for our town because we didn't know what to expect. And with minimal medical services and no testing, we decided to just brace for impact. As you can see, with circumstances going the way they are, a lot of it is just our geographical luck, as well as people doing an incredible job at socially distancing and taking this very seriously. So now is the time when our public health order is expiring and a new public health order starts on Friday. We had to make the decision of what to do. But we needed to wait because the state's public health order, Safer at Home, did not get published out to all the local public health department until the actual order until this morning at 9:45. So we assumed we were going to have to issue a stricter guidance. When Jim and I sat down 12 feet apart to read this order, it's so comprehensive and it matches what we are hoping for so well that we're just going to go and align with the Safer at Home order. We had plans to implement about 5 other restrictive activities, but because of this comprehensive public health order, we feel we have the tools to work with and to help keep our community at the lowest risk we possibly can. We realize our goal is not to have 0 COVID cases. That is unrealistic. We know that economically we can't lock ourselves up for 2 years if that's what it takes. And we want to get people back to work. And we also want to get responsibility back into the hands of our citizens too, to do the right thing for each other and ourselves. So I don't know, I can go over some talking points of Safer at Home. I don't know if you all have watched the governor's press release. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. I don't know if you want me to just say how this will look in Silverton. Is there any suggestions at this time? And if you need me to go into a little bit of detail, I'm not going to go into a ton. I'm happy to. So it's actually a 34-page document. And so it did take us a few hours to really find comb. Does anybody not want me to go into a little bit of detail?
I think it'd be helpful to do an overview, and then I imagine there'll be a couple of specific questions afterwards.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Safer at Home, in my opinion, is not drastically different than what Stay at Home was, but it does allow some more opportunities if people are following the guidance and the requirements to operate a business safely. The main points are they still want you to stay at home. They don't want you to do any unnecessary travel if you can help it. They define all that in this order. They want you to avoid unnecessary interactions. They want you to only do necessary activities. They want you to keep your gatherings to 10 or less, either public or private. And they really want to encourage vulnerable people, or not want to encourage, they're encouraging vulnerable people to still continue to stay home, protect themselves, and try not to get increased risk. For Silverton, what this looks like is, well, for all over the state, because we're following the state's guidance, and we're really happy about that. We didn't want to be unnecessarily, more strict. We did consult our county lawyer this afternoon, tweaked a couple more things. So this is what we're getting this from as well. Restaurants and coffee houses, food service, it's still to remain, as long as I understand this right. I know we do have a lawyer here, so please correct me if, actually several lawyers here, please correct me if I'm wrong. It's a very dense document that's full of a lot of information. But from what I understand is that restaurants and coffee houses and bars, restaurants and coffee houses are still to have curbside, delivery, etc. service. There is not to be any occupation in the restaurant quite yet. And the same goes for bars, cigar bars, gyms, movies, movie theaters, casinos, horse tracks. They really don't want to open that up yet to that crowd gathering situation. They switched the wording on essential businesses to critical businesses. So now they're calling the essential businesses critical. They still want people to, essentially any business that's open does need to have, it has certain requirements that I'll go over in a second or a minute here. But one thing that they're allowing is retail businesses to do curbside if they are following the requirements, because that is applicable to us. We have a lot of retail. If they're following the specific requirements, then people may come into those shops. This also allows construction in our town. That last order with construction will expire Thursday. So new permits, out-of-town construction workers may come into our town. Landscaping, real estate may happen. And we're not asking people to quarantine if they leave town, even for the day to go shop. We're asking people really to wear protective facial coverings, wash hands, cough or sneeze in your sleeve if you have to, and socially distance. This is still consistent throughout this order. And all businesses that are going to be open, also their employees need to wear masks. They need to have a specific, there's quite a bit actually. And forgive me if you know this already, but all businesses, including critical and non-critical, must wear face coverings. They must deputize a workplace coordinator to address COVID issues. They do need to take temperatures. They do need to clean and disinfect all high-touch areas, place signage for good hygiene, ensure proper ventilation, avoid gatherings of more than 10 people in their shop or their business. And then they need to implement a symptom monitoring protocol for their employees. So that is doing temperature checks for their employees, monitoring symptoms, and having a plan. So it's not going to be easy, but at least it's doable. There's a lot of detail in this document. And what we hope to do this week is to really get education out. The chamber meeting on Wednesday will be able to break every business type in sections and go over the requirements to be able to open and operate as a business. They continue to encourage people to not travel outside of their county and not to recreate outside of their county or 10 miles away. And so our county still is not open to visitors, just like La Plata County or Ouray County. And so what we also would like to do, the one exception that we were going to add to this public health order was to have a mandatory quarantine for second homeowners and seasonal workers to return to do. But after consulting our county lawyer, we are now going to make an advisory instead. So it's not mandated, but it is a strongly advised that people who are returning from other counties or communities, that they do try as best they can to separate themselves from the public for a couple weeks. in case they acquired COVID and they don't even know they're symptom free, or in their travels or coming here or right before they left, they did get it. And so we are asking people essentially to quarantine as much as possible. So now I will open it up to questions and comments and concerns, and we really appreciate your time.
Trustees, any questions for our OEM team? I do have one if no one else does. And I'm scrolling through, so if somebody is raising their hand and I'm missing it, I apologize. My question is about Airbnbs, VRBOs, hostels, motels, hotels. There's no guidance that I saw in the update about at what stage these businesses will be permitted open, or specifically in San Juan County. It seems in other counties, hospitality businesses are operating, albeit under much stricter guidelines. And I'm curious what our plan is with those.
I don't want to overspeak because we do have Paul on the line. Paul, have you done much research with this public health order yet?
I have not, so I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay. So essentially so essential travelers or critical travelers are able to lodge here. I'm giving this my best shot right now. And like I said, we just got off the phone with the lawyer about 2 hours ago with our first round of questions. So this will be another, just to confirm. But our critical travelers or workers, most often they are the EPA or, someone else. So if they were to choose to stay in a VRBO or an Airbnb, that would be their choice, correct? We're not opening to visitors under the Safer at Home order. So we shouldn't be having any short-term visitors here, correct? So that's what we're going off of, is that, yes, they can operate. I mean, I don't see anywhere, I didn't either, Shane. And so right now we'll have to get more information on it. But I think by default, I don't know how much they'll be engaged anyways.
Okay. I mean, I was looking at the Safer at Home guidelines that the state put out, and there's some key categories that seem to be missing from the list of sectors. Construction seems to fall under the field services and real estate, but there's definitely no hospitality sector. And I'm sure that there are other business categories that are missing, where we have residents that are going to be curious and asking for that clarification.
No, that's really great, Shane. Thank you. And I will get that. I will ask that of our lawyer.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
And just to chime in as well, we can send out we're posting both the governor's executive order and the stay-at-home order on the county website, and we can email it to John Ryder, who can then distribute it to everybody. But there is actually a section in the public health order, and hotels are listed under critical infrastructure. So hotels, VRBO, and Airbnb. But we can provide, a lot of this, just as Becky said, we actually read it this morning, met with the county attorney this afternoon. So we're still working out a lot of the details. Another important piece to know is, our current public health order is in effect until April 30th. So we have this week really to work out a lot of these, a lot of details. So just know that we are cranking through it. as is just about every county in Colorado who's got this issue, because we all got it this morning. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I suppose one other quick question about construction. That seems to be what I've seen the most, or received the most public questions about, that I've kicked over to your team or Bill McDougall. But what is, so for people who are going to be attempting to pull new building permits starting Thursday, that have instructed their contractors on what our protocols are, is there perhaps like a one-page worksheet that can be put together that can be distributed with that building permit and posted at the job site, so that it's clear what rules are being followed, so that we don't have, you know, residents or property owners that are going to be fined or treated with some, you know, just, you know, different treatment from job site to job site?
Yes, yeah, I'll take that, Becky. Yeah, that we will be providing guidance per sector. So we've already met with Bill McDougall, who operates permits for the town, and make sure that he's got all that information so he can communicate it very clearly on the expectations, and that on the construction sites, that they know exactly what is expected. So if they aren't meeting the expectations, you know, it has been made clear to them.
Great. Something I'm keenly aware of is how hard it is sometimes to get contractors to come to Silverton. And
Yeah.
if they're up here and then the rules aren't clear, and then they get yelled at for breaking one of them, then they're likely to not come back.
Yeah, we're completely aware of a lot of those issues, and we really, you know, hope to, you know, we'll be straight up. I mean, there's going to be definitely bumps in the road, but we just want to make sure that people know that we're working to get things back to some level of normality. So we'll help out with that for sure.
And I can speak to that a little. You know, Bill was allowed to assist in crafting the new public health order in regards to contractors and how, and you know, depending on what Jim and Becky ultimately decide to put in, but there was a you know, entire set of procedures, Mayor Furman, including that the contractors coming in, their foreman would be given, you know, a summarized list. It would be distributed to the individual employees with that contractor. It would be posted on the job site, and it would be made very clear that it would be strictly enforced, you know, often without warning, but on a case-by-case basis, with the ultimate penalty, certainly if there was a repeat offense, that those contractors would be asked to leave immediately and stop work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Bill's done a great job just helping us through all this. And there is a form that I saw that another public health department has for if you are a critical or non-critical business. I'm not sure, we haven't quite worked that out yet, but essentially you need to, anybody that's doing service here, they fill out this form, it's linked on the website, and then they fill out the form to how they are going, their plan of keeping their site, you know, within all these requirements. And we plan to follow that. And that will be for construction as well. I mean, you know, it's just a good thing to be able to partner with people, make sure everybody understands the rules, and set people up for success. So.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions for the OEM team? Trustee Wiegert.
Not so much a question, but just a comment. I really would like to thank Becky Joyce and Jim Donovan, and also Deanne Gallegos for all your diligence and hard work over the past couple months dealing with this situation, and really just looking forward to getting things rolling again. And I'm hoping that people can continue to make a living here in Silverton, and that we can continue to live here and allow the town to operate. So whatever that takes, you know, to make that happen. We love this community, and hopefully we can make it work. We know it's going to come here at some point. Like Jim said, you know, there's no isolating ourselves completely from this, but if we can just manage our cases somehow and allow the businesses to operate and allow people to just live here and make a living, you know, that's great. So thank you guys so much, and really hoping that we can move forward here.
Thank you.
Jesse.
I do have, I suppose, one just last question. There seems to be a good amount of funding for the public health side of things through this CARES Act. Is there any possibility of making a case that Silverton should be setting up more infrastructure for a permanent public health facility, or expanding our permanent public health facility and utilizing funding from the CARES Act, as opposed to just looking at the triage we're doing now? Is there like a bigger plan we can look at because of how this highlighted our needs and the extreme measures we had to take as a result of our needs?
There probably is. I've been so in the weeds with all this and setting up a test site and applying for a grant for the test site that I don't know the answer to that question. We did receive from the state Emergency Preparedness and Response Fund about $15,000, or we are receiving, we haven't even gotten it yet. And that essentially was passed down from the feds to the state. And I believe we got, was it $6 million for Colorado? And because of our population, we receive about $15,000. So I'm sure there's a lot of room for more funding. And I wish it wasn't just a one nurse agency to be able to figure that one out as well. So any help or assistance, expertise people have, that would be great.
Yeah, and let me just chime in real quick, and then Molly, we can get your question. But we do, just so everybody knows, we are really operating as the incident management team, and so we're dealing with really the issues in the next 2-week segments. And we did set up a recovery team, which John Ryder is a member of, and Willie Tukey as a county administrator, and they are looking at that bigger picture. So Shane, I think you're absolutely spot on. We definitely need to think of how can we build our infrastructure here and make sure that we have capacity in the future for things like this. And it's definitely an area of, if you are able to, or anyone on this video chat are able to provide some time towards it, I'm sure Willie and John would love you guys to jump on. I won't speak for them, but I'm sure that'd be great.
Trustee Brilla?
So we've been talking a lot about this during the meetings for the prospectus to put forth, and health clinic and or whatever you want to call it, localized medicine in Silverton was one of the top priorities to begin with. If we can get somebody to invest into Silverton, that was one of our #1 goals through that prospectus. So this isn't something that's not been on everybody's mind. This highlights the necessity right now for, I don't know, does anybody know a doctor that wants to move to Silverton permanently? I mean, that's really the big issue. We're lucky you guys saved Agnes through the clinic. So there's a lot of hard work that goes into this behind the scenes, no matter what. And it's not like nobody's thought of it. It's just, where's it gonna come from? We've got a facility, it's being fixed up. So eventually it could be what it was when I was a kid. Hey, we had a doctor that showed up there. We used to all go get our checkups and everything there. They had a pharmacy in there. So we're not saying it's not now, but it could be within 3 to 5 years. Save that money, don't spend it. We can do something with all this. So good job, team. Yeah.
You know, I would add, because as Molly said, Trustee Barella said, improved healthcare, a facility, on-site doctors, dentists, et cetera, has been a quote unquote pressing need for many years. if there is a silver lining to the COVID, and there are very few, is that this will put the spotlight on it and probably accelerate interest in getting it done. Because it's one of these things where we never thought something like this could happen, probably never even thought of it, but it happened, and now highlights the need even further.
Yes, thank you. Trustee Lashley.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak and ask if the trustees, I know it doesn't follow our protocols necessarily, but it is really difficult if we could open this up for public questions and comments once trustees have kind of, and staff have kind of finished their questions and comments, because it's great to see you guys face to face, and it would be great if they could ask you guys the questions face to face if they have them.
Yep, Trustee Lashley. I think the next thing we will do is open the public comment, and I think it would be good to keep the OEM team on in the event that we do have a question from the public. We do only have 7 attendees, and a few of them are town staff. So I guess unless there's anything else pressing at this moment, if there is someone listening that would like to ask a question or comment, please click the raise hand button on your Zoom screen. It looks like we do not. We'll give them another second while I continue to talk. I think there's a handful of folks watching the YouTube channel as well, but we don't have a great means for responding to questions through YouTube. So I would ask you to jump over to Zoom if you are on YouTube and do have a question. With that, I suppose for now we can conclude unless the OEM team has any parting remarks.
I just want to highlight how much is being done in town by so many people, and it's just incredible. The food bank served, I believe, 50 bags. Jim Harper and Molly, you can tell us, last Friday. You know, Kim White is doing an amazing job, and John Ryder, of raising funds and just really meeting the needs of a lot of our community through food and potential rent assistance. And I mean, I could go on and on. There are so many even unknown volunteers. And I mean, I think we've gotten over 35 to 40 prescriptions picked up and dropped off back into town, and, you know, trash by Carrie Metzler, and the list just goes on and on. And I hear so many more remarks of kind remarks to us than I do some of the not so kind remarks about this situation. And, you know, they by far, you know, just people really being human and being compassionate and wanting to keep our community members safe. And so I just really commend the county of San Juan County and town of Silverton that it's really shown throughout all of this. So thanks to everybody. It's not just us, it's our whole town that's making this happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
As Bruce would say, Silverton strong.
Well, thank you all. I think we're gonna move on now to the consent agenda, unless there's other presentations scheduled. I don't believe there are.
None scheduled, Mayor.
Thank you all. So does anyone have any questions about payroll, accounts payable, or meeting minutes from our packets? Trustee Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I just was wondering, what does SGM stand for?
SGM is our town engineer. They've been working on several projects throughout the year. These would be final payments. So they were doing work Big work on the water treatment plant and tank refurbishment this summer. Wastewater treatment plant upgrade and actually kind of master plan of upgrades to the water treatment plant. Water security study, just to name three. There's a fourth that I can't remember. Most of these costs are being funded out of grants that John Sight secured. And then there's ongoing, smaller engineering questions, but those would be the 3 or 4 big ones. And these will probably be final payments for those projects.
Trustee Uyghur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a minor grammatical change to the minutes on page 9. Looking down about halfway down the page where it says, the sentence starts, Trustee Uyghur said it's been a pleasure working with the outgoing board and Mayor Tukey for all she's done. There's no action there after and. I believe what happened in the meeting there, I thanked the mayor for all she's done. I think that should read, it's been a pleasure working with the outgoing board and thanked Mayor Tukey for all she's done. If we could just add that one word there, minor grammatical change. Otherwise, I'm okay with everything else. Thank you.
So noted.
Quick question on the accounts payable, the Securo payments for IT. Do we make those once a month or twice a month?
Just once.
So we have one, were we just late or early on a payment? Because we have one on the 9th and another one on the 23rd.
The 9th was probably pushed from March, Mayor Furman. We are deferring and pushing where we can. Sometimes it makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't. Town Clerk Freeze, do you have any detail? I don't want to speak out of turn here. It is once a month contract payment, Mayor Furman. And so I'm assuming, I would assume the April 9th payment was a deferment from March. The town clerk may have stepped away.
If we could just double check that that wasn't a double payment, but I think you're probably
Will do.
right. Trustee Barella, yeah.
It's only once a month that we pay them.
But
So-
Kelly, if you could just confirm that we didn't accidentally make a double payment.
No,
Just
that's,
to follow.
that check register showed for the last time that we paid and this time, so it was just only a one-time payment.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Trustee Barella?
So back to what I asked, I think 2 meetings ago, was about whether or not we could defer Quiet Bear. So obviously, the trash cans came to town. I've already been sent a picture. They are absolutely amazing, but yeah, we still had to cough up the dough. I see it. in there.
Yeah, we immediately after the meeting, Trustee Barella, I went to see where we were at and stop it if we could, but they had been delivered literally, almost the day of the board meeting.
Well, when we get back open, they are quite amazing. So good job.
So do we need, yes, Trustee Uyghur?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second,
Kelly, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Waggart?
Yes.
Trustee Bierma? Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Trustee Lashley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Trustee reports is our next section. Does anyone have a report to offer? In which
We had a
case-
planning commission meeting.
Yeah, please go ahead.
It was a long one, mostly concerned with the about 2 hours of discussion on the tiny home park at the southern end of the county. The planning commission voted denial of the project again. The county commissioners have approved it once in the preliminary, and it's up to them and whether they'll approve the final or not. And then we worked with our planner, Lisa Dare, on the ordinance for ADUs. I think that ordinance, after a little bit of tweaking, is going to come back for approval to the planning commission before we see it as the board here.
Thank you, Trustee Lashley. Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just curious at that meeting if either you, Mayor Furman, or Trustee Lashley had an opportunity to pitch the master planning board to the planning commission and to get their intake on or input on what they thought of that.
I had not yet had an opportunity to speak with Planner Adair, and so I didn't present it at that meeting. I do have a proposal for this meeting that I'm happy to talk about now and then formally propose it when we move on to continued business. But in talking with Planner Adair, the idea that we discussed is she needs substantive support so that she can spend time developing the revisions to the master plan further. She's working on that, as well as the code updates and many other things. And in order to make, I think, faster progress, the format that would work best would be to put a committee together underneath her that would help her develop those revisions faster to then propose up to the planning commission, which would then make recommendations to both the county and the town. It sounds like the county portion of the master plan is in good shape and is often referenced in decisions that they make, whereas the town portions are less, they haven't been updated or revised recently and are rarely referenced in decisions made with respect to the town. So it doesn't seem at this point as important for a general master planning committee to work on revisions relating to the county portion, just the town portion. So we thought we could break that out into a smaller working group that would work with Lisa to help her expedite the revisions.
That's great. I think it's a good idea. And I just was wondering if it was mentioned to the planning commission or if it was going to move forward or not. So I'm glad to hear that it's got some direction. And I think working with Lisa is a good way to go. So nice work.
Yeah, Jess, we were most of the way through the ADU discussion, and we were trying to get that kind of wrapped up for presentation to the town board without having to return to the planning commission for a second time. And we'd been there, I think at that point, over 3.5 hours. So it was starting to, we were starting to lose attention of the members of the planning commission and attendance. So if we had wanted to, I don't think we would have had the opportunity to bring it up then.
Trustee Barella, did you have a comment or a question? You are still muted.
Sorry, I had to use my iPad. My computer would not connect at all today. So my question is actually for Todd. So about the Amerisport, I don't know how on my iPad to see who's listening. Is he available?
He is on as an attendee and he just raised his hand. Lisa, can you allow Todd to speak? There he is.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Todd.
Hey, good evening.
So my question for you, we had allotted 10,000, so we literally only spent like 2,500, more or less, on equipment. And that all just came back when for that refund?
The refund, what happened was we had paid with a card and there was also a check mailed.
Okay.
So we had a credit with them and it just took some sorting to get that back. So there was a double payment that was refunded. And then in regard to the actual budgeting, I believe our total expense, our budget was 10,000 and I believe we spent about 7,300 if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so I was reading that totally different the way that was stated in your report. So that makes more sense now. So we saved about 2,500 then, more or less. We didn't spend all of the 10, but we do have equipment going forward if we're able to open for the next upcoming season, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Trustee Wiegert.
Just as a point of order, are we
Yep.
are we finished with trustee reports and on staff reports now, or?
No, we're still in trustee reports. And we can revisit that conversation with Todd momentarily. Trustee Barney, did you have Mayor Pro Tem Barney? Sorry.
It's fine. For Kendall?
Oh, an update?
Oh, no, sorry, no question, just Zoom.
Okay. Trustee reports, it sounds like we're all done with that. There was a Kendall meeting. There wasn't anything terribly substantive. It was a work session to continue talking about the newspaper articles that they'll continue to put out, and then formalizing that Trustee Lashley and myself will not be on that committee as soon as the new members at large from the community are selected, and they are still taking applications for those. And with that, we'll move on to continued business. The substance of our agenda this evening for continued business is the committees and appointments. So before we jump into those, the master planning working group that I just referenced, I would like to propose that we create that with 2 or 3 members from this group, as well as a number of members from the community at large that we would take applications from. And since it's town focused, I'm not sure that it's necessary to include a county commissioner on that working group. And the idea again is to take on assignments from Planner Adair and do substantive work for her, and then provide her with that work product so that she can aggregate it and then direct it up to the Planning Commission that will consider it. And this is a big to-do list item for her that she needs support with. And I'm curious, I would like to propose that I chair that working group. And I'm curious what everyone here thinks about that and their interest in participating. I saw Trustee Wiegert raise his hand. Trustee Wiegert.
Well, I'm just waiting to see if we have any other comments here. I just am curious if this is going to go. We're going to need to draft a resolution, and eventually, right? That's what this is going to take. We decide to do it, and so just drafting a resolution and then going that way. But if we can talk about it a little bit, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask Attorney Kosnick, since this isn't an official committee and it's a working group to support Planner Adair, what is the proper process for formalizing this? The other component of this that I spoke with Planner Adair about is facilitating community engagement through visioning sessions or other means so that their input can be at both ends of the process, both in preparing the revisions to the master plan with respect to the town, and also on the back end. I know the Planning Commission intended to put out whatever revisions they were happy with to the community for comment. But there would be another layer of engagement on the front end with this format.
Sorry, was
Trustee
that a
Lashley.
question?
Yeah, that was a question for you, but Trustee Lashley, do you want to jump in before?
No, let's hear from Attorney Kosnick here first.
Great, thank you.
So for the creation of this committee, it's probably best to do it by resolution. But the board today can talk about, the number of people they'd like to see on that committee, the type of appointments and all that. Then we could, staff can hook into a resolution that could be on the upcoming agenda.
Great. So I'd propose that we have three of us, if there's sufficient interest. Planner Adair would be the primary staff member participating in the committee, or working group, whatever the official title becomes. And Administrator Ryder also expressed interest in participating. I would think that it would be helpful to have him as a member of the committee, similar to how he participates in the Kendall Mountain Committee. And then we can include other staff as advisors to the extent the sections that we're working on are relevant to those staff, such as anything relating to town infrastructure and utilities. We'd look to John Seitz or Parks Rec, Todd, and possibly Lisa Branner. Trustee Brilla, yeah.
I guess I'm a little worried about you chairing it, considering you basically run an investment company that relies on property around town. So is that technically a conflict of interest, rewriting a master plan? Just, I don't know if Mr. Kosnick can answer that question.
Before we jump to Attorney Kosnick jumping in, I think it's important to clarify that I own a company that owns a hotel. We don't currently have any other projects in the works. I was very transparent through the campaign process that I am interested in doing additional projects in Silverton if the opportunities arise, but none exist today. No funds have been raised. And I think that the background I have in setting these things up would be very helpful in connection with developing the master plan. But Attorney Kosnick, please weigh in.
So I think we just have to explore a little further what the committee's role would be. At this point, my understanding is more of a working group advisory committee that probably wouldn't have any kind of formal decision-making authority. So, off the top of my head, I wouldn't potentially see a conflict created, but we need to explore a little more about the committee and, the role that everybody would take.
Thank you. That's a good point. The idea is to be doing work for Lisa that would still go through all of the decision-making processes that already exist through Lisa, through the Planning Commission, and then proposed up to the town or county as relevant. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think it still keeps the Planning Commission involved in the master planning process, and kind of allows them to kind of have kind of a final edit before it comes before the town board, but it also allows it to kind of move forward with the work that we've had on our planner Lisa Adair's plate. The master planning process has fallen kind of woefully behind schedule, and I'd love to see it forward and on schedule. I like the suggestion. I actually think that a good structure, and I'd love to hear other trustees' opinions on this as well, is that we have two trustees, one trustee who's on the planning commission and potentially one that is not on the planning commission, one member of the planning commission as a appointed role, and that those three people on the committee would then select members at large. It gives a nice majority to have at least three people selecting the other two members of the or the other members of at large. And I would suggest no more than two members at large to keep the committee small and functional. But that's all up for discussion. And I also want to voice some support for Mayor Furman chairing that committee. Working with Mayor Furman on the Kendall board, he's always been very good at crafting the language that is behind some of the writing for the Kendall board, and I think that that would be very helpful in kind of creating the language of the master plan.
Thank you, Trustee Lashley. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. So I'm seeing this committee as a way to address kind of what Trustee Wiegert was bringing up last week, in that the master planning process is so far behind on the part of the town that this could work to serve as revisions that plan is needing without starting completely from scratch and overhauling the whole process. Am I understanding this correctly? And Trustee Wiegert, is that, am I hearing what you were saying correctly?
Well, if I could respond real quickly, that was the direction that we've been headed. You know, granted, we're past due date and we've gone through 3 separate planners. Just to keep the ball rolling, that was a suggestion that I made. Be interested to hear what other members of the board feel, whether we should just throw that old master plan away and just go out with something new, or if there's something there that we can work with. Having read it multiple times, I think that there's a lot of things in there that we would still continue to agree with. Though we want to attract families, and we want to have a sustainable community, and we want to have a nice place where kids can be safe, and I think a lot of that stuff is going to just carry over into the new master plan. I think there's definitely things in there that we can reuse, but you know, if we're going to have a whole committee that's responsible, maybe we take a look at exactly what's in there and really getting together a good, you know, doing what it says, getting together a good master plan so that we can have some direction moving forward in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Thank you, Trustee Wiegert. Trustee Brella.
Jess, last meeting, you did say that the revisions were all that were necessary. So I'm a little confused on why you changed your opinion this time. I liked the thought moving forward, so that way we could give some assistance. So if this is a working group to give assistance, I'm for the formation of it. But I thought it was to help with revisions first before we scrap the master plan and move on. That was where your position was last week. So can you tell me what changed in your mind to make you change what you're saying, Trustee Wiegert?
If I can
jump in, actually, Trustee Wiegert, could I jump in, because this is really, I think, being driven by a conversation that I had with Planner Adair as opposed to a planning commission issue. And it sounds like the revision process is the most helpful. That's the project that's on her plate that I'm proposing we assist with. And an overhaul of the master plan, and speaking with Administrator Ryder, could, you know, for DMR was a $500,000 4-year or 5-year project. Assisting Planner Adair with revisions could happen much, much faster with potentially no or little cost. So the proposal that I'm making is to just support Planner Adair on on the revision process.
Okay, and if I could respond, I haven't really changed my mind either direction. I'm fine with revisions. I think that's actually the best way to go. I think that's the most efficient thing, and I think sounds like our town and county planner Adair is feeling the same way too. So I think if we can just check this box off, we can get a revised master plan out there. That's fine. I'm just trying to simply be flexible and just try to keep this thing moving forward and get something done.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
Well, and that's why I thought it was so important what you said last week, Trustee Wiegert, because you have been on the planning board for 4 years. You've actually seen this come and go. So you know better than anybody what has been happening, what's available out there, and what needs to be done and how we need to assist. So I agree. If you agree, I think you would know best because you've been on there so long. So thank you for that comment.
And thank you, Trustee Barella. I appreciate that.
Trustee Lashley?
Thanks, Mayor Furman. Yeah, even the revision process now has through 3 different planners become a little bit more lengthy than it maybe needs to be for one planner to go through. I believe the last time that this document was kind of came in front of us, we had a ton of these extra notes from Mr. Rivas during his tenure and a lot of work that he had put into it. And just even incorporating, some of those notes into revisions, it's going to be kind of a process that I think could use a focus group to kind of go and pick through and kind of consolidate that vision of the master plan with kind of these other kind of ideas from these different planners that we've had thus far. But I think that we can do it as kind of more of a revision process. But I think it's going to take some work to kind of navigate through some of these different trains of thought almost that we have going right now in the document and the information that we have.
Thank you. And Trustee Harper, yes.
We just had a very nice meeting with Councilor Kosnick about the chain of command, and I better want to understand your conversation with Lisa Adair.
Okay. So I spoke with Administrator Ryder to see to what extent the master plan was a town versus county work product. And we're trying to understand the role and scope of each committee and how those committees can be most productive, and looking at what the issues we've had in making progress on some of these larger projects in front of the town. And one of those large projects is seeing that the town portion of the master plan can keep up with the county portion, which according to everyone that I've spoken with is in pretty good shape. And so after speaking with Administrator Ryder, I had a conversation with Planner Adair to get a better understanding of where that was at, so that I could also understand to what extent the Planning Commission and our town code provisions are in line with the scope of what the Planning Commission's doing and how the master plan is being prioritized. And now I'm reporting back to this group where that ended, and suggestions from Administrator Ryder and Planner Adair on how we can best support the town staff with our committee formats.
Is Lisa able to have any comments provided for us?
Yeah, Lisa, I see, or Planner Adair, I see that you're on the attendee list. Are you able to speak?
Hello?
Hi.
What question do you have for me?
I suppose that's coming from Trustee Harper.
Well, I just wanted to better understand your conversation with Mr. Mayor Furman. Since you're on the original planning committee, and now there's this conversation of forming a new one, a new advisory. I want to better understand your thoughts and feelings about this.
the more citizen input, I think that the better the master plan will end up. I believe that the deadline for updating the master plan is December 2020. I've tried to reconstruct the master plan that was deconstructed by the previous planner. And I got a call from Mayor Furman, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday about this. And we just talked about the town county master plan and how that is used and how it works and how it's being updated. I also let him know that the bottleneck has been my workload rather than the planning commission, and that the main reason the updates aren't done yet, aside from the state that it was left in when the previous planner left, is because of that the town could use more planning staff, but budgets don't allow for more than one person. So I have focused on the applications and adopted regulations that are part of law rather than the master plan, which is used less frequently than the adopted town codes.
Thank you. Trustee Bierma's had his hand up for a long time. If we would like to go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think forming a group like this is a great idea, and that's my interest in participating in it if we do move forward and move in that direction.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
Yeah, my thoughts were for Lisa. So is there a way that you would have this sectioned out for different individuals or different subcommittees to start helping you with? Because it sounds like you've got some nailed down and some not. So where do you think it stands, Lisa? What would be best for you? Is it section by section? Is it, I mean, you tell us what you think.
I do not know how this committee is going to help, what way we should structure it. I know for me, the main thing that I need to get the master plan done is time. I just need time to incorporate the revisions already given to me from the previous planner and the planning commission, and have the time set aside to be able to put the pieces back together of the master plan. But if there are people out there that want to help, then I suppose everyone could be handed a chapter. The main thing is that the previous planner decided to redo the order of the master plan. So he was in the process of breaking apart and reorganizing the table of contents. So what I tried to do was put that back together into more of a final product. It was sort of like a teapot that had been smashed into 1,000 pieces. So I tried to glue it back together to get it into more of a final document, and then take the volumes of information that's already been provided by the Planning Commission. And so I'm not quite sure how committees should be structured to help with those, gluing those pieces back together.
Thank you.
Trustee Harper?
Thank you, Mayor. But Lisa, you do feel that the formation of this proposed committee would be there to help you, to assist you with giving you the time that you need to implement what you need?
If a committee is formed, I'm certainly willing to take the help if it's being offered, and hopefully that will move the process along faster.
So the committee the planning committee right now, does that help you at all? Move it along any faster?
The Planning Commission,
Yes, ma'am.
they're waiting on me to incorporate their revisions and the information compiled by the previous planner. So it's on me right now. I'm the bottleneck, and my limited time if I were permitted to work 40 hours a week, which I can't do, and the town and county doesn't really have the budget for, then the master plan would already be put back together and adopted. But with the other things on my plate, it's been pushed back. So the planning commission already did the revisions. They already gave me the revisions they want to see, and they were excellent ideas, very progressive. So now it's just a matter of setting aside 2 or 3 weeks without other projects going on. And that's been the hard part, is finding 2 or 3 weeks of time to compile the information into a document that's ready to be adopted.
And you feel that that the trustees and our mayor can help you in this process and craft the language?
I think there's certainly things that could be changed or improved in the master plan. It's a pretty good document. It's still all accurate for what we're going for today. It's been updated by the planning commission, and the reason it's not done yet is more of a time and workload matter. So I'm hoping the committee, if a committee ends up formed and wants to offer help, then I'd be willing to take the help.
Planner Adair, it's my understanding that there hasn't been any community engagement with respect to the proposed revisions yet. That seems to be another significant time-consuming process that will be necessary before any revisions to the master plan can be approved. Is that the case? Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, the previous planner held months of meetings with the planning commission. And then after he left, I picked up where he left off. And there were 3 planning commission meetings about the master plan that are all open to the public. After the master plan is updated and the planning commission likes what they see, then they hold a public hearing on it. Then they incorporate those public comments into a newer version. Then they pass it on to the town board that has public hearings on it and the county commissioners that have public hearings on it. So we're not quite to that point yet, but we're approaching it.
I'm going to go out and say something controversial, but that sounds like a flawed process to me. It seems very important that the public be included in participating in the revisions before all of the time is spent to prepare a master plan revision that goes to a public comment period. That seems like a misuse of town resources to spend all the time making a final document before having any public engagement. Trustee Barella.
Former planner Revis was actually trying to, I don't know, work with the planning commission somehow, and he wanted to have neighborhood by neighborhood engagements, and nothing ever happened. And I was under the impression we wanted to have the Lisa Branner perfected method of going about this a second time in order to have a real community engagement like we did with the Kendall Mountain planning process, as well as all of the trails process that she's been doing. So I'm not sure where the breakdown is happening for you, Lisa, in reference to that. I know that Mr. Revis never started it, and I'm not sure if you were just dumped this or if you had a chance to even look at doing those community engagements.
Trustee
I agree
Barella,
completely.
You might be referring to the work on the separate individual zoning districts for the town code, like the ED zone and the R2 zone, and changes that we just started working on, Bill McDougall, John Ryder, and myself as the code committee. I think what you're talking about would be revising the uses by right and the use is subject to review for the separate zoning districts, such as the ED zone. And that would be more something I think we would cover with the code committee.
Trustee Barilla.
I'm not really sure. I would have to go back and look because we're looking at over 2 years ago that Mr. Revis was supposedly planning all of this for it to happen. So I can go review my notes and send them to you if you'd like.
I know he had big plans for changing the ED zone that was quite controversial. And I would love to jump back into looking at those separate zoning districts, and that would be the regulations in the municipal code, which is one of the things I've been focusing on instead of the master plan, because the municipal code seems to be more the legal adopted codes. So the way that I see this is we have this concern about developers or people with some money moving into this area and taking advantage of our not quite up to date regulations. And the thing that they could take advantage of would be the lack of updates to the municipal code rather than the master plan. So in the number of months I've been over there at the planning department, I have focused more on the municipal code than the master plan because of that risk of money and developers coming in and not steamrolling, but being able to take advantage of our regulations that are behind. And that would be more the municipal code than the master plan.
Thank you, Planner Adair. Trustee Wiegert and then Administrator Ryder.
Well, just to add on to that, I mean, that's a position that Lisa was put into right as soon as she gained her position, was with the very controversial new garage and storage house for San Miguel Power right on Green Street. So we can understand where you come from there. And Lisa, I hope you take the formation of this committee as no reflection on the work you've done or the all the stuff that was put on your plate when you obtained this job. I think you've done fantastic working through everything that's been left on your desk and getting these projects that have been forgotten about up and rolling and progressing, and you're doing great things for the town and county. And I also just wanted to comment, going back to the formation of this committee or planning board or whatever you want to call it. You know, if we want to go with 3 trustees, I think it's a great idea that we have one trustee who's involved with the planning commission as well. You know, and I would be happy to be that person if that's the direction we choose to go.
Thank you. Administrator Ryder.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak and offer context, to my comments, in that I don't know how many people within this group have actually participated in the execution of a master plan of one of this magnitude. I've done half a dozen, if not directly, but directly forming them or directly executing them. And the ones I've been on, the most notable comparison maybe is Purgatory. We started from scratch. We may or may not be starting from scratch here. I'm going to respectfully disagree that this is a good document as is. I don't think it is. It's missing a whole component of execution. There's a lot of vision. There's a lot of conceptual planning. There's some specifics. There's no mention of how it's to be executed. And I know those aren't specific and plans change. I also note that 10 years later, after the 2010 plan, there's a great portion of that master plan that has never come to fruition. So it calls into question for me whether the master plan of 2010 was really that well thought and what Silverton was going to be capable of and how they were going to execute these things. Did they have the resources to execute these things? We also form master plans with great assistance from outside expert consulting, from planning to conceptual layouts to engineering. You know, the DMR master plan, at the end of the day, we knew where every sewer pipe was going to go, where every water pipe was going to go, what type of architecture was going to be prevalent in each neighborhood, how many neighborhoods we were going to have. consulting the outside utility services. I mean, on and on and on and on. It was that detailed. And it took the better part of 3 years, maybe over 3 years. And I might have said $500,000 before, but it was probably far greater that. You know, we put that on Lisa Adair's plate to accomplish. This wasn't a simple, in my mind, this master plan is not a simple update a few paragraphs and change the date. Man, this thing needs a major overhaul. And the other thing is maybe there was nothing wrong with the 2010 master plan. It's just this town has been so fluid in the last 10 years, and it's going to be so fluid for the next 10 years that a lot of thought and a lot of public input and a lot more thought and then a lot more public input is absolutely going to be necessary to create a usable document that's to really provide our guidance for what we do and how the decisions we make over the next 10 years. So, you know, Mayor Furman consulted me as, you know, whether a committee would be informed with however many people, and I'm you know, who's on the committee and what. I want to help Lisa. I want to help Lisa to ultimately help the town to develop a quality document that can be executed and is supported by this town. And I don't want anybody on this board to underestimate what a massive undertaking that's going to be.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, well, so in that case, you know, the structure that Lisa Branner has used with the Kendall Committee has been really efficient and like a very much a working group. And so I think if we can do something similar for Lisa, I support giving her that help. And I like the way you said it, Mr. Ryder, just to support the town, because Lisa's not going to get, there's not going to be another person in the planning department. So this seems like a really good approach to working with her.
You make a good point, Trustee Barney, in that the Kendall Committee is at a stage where it is requesting information that will ultimately, hopefully, lead to a request for proposal to bring in a private partner that ultimately will have deep pockets to hire the expertise to assist in forming a master plan just for the Kendall Mountain expansion. We are at the master planning stage, and we have no plans to hire any type of outside expertise consulting to assist in the formation of that master plan, and we probably won't be able to. So again, just trying to put in context and frame the awesome responsibility that's been put on Lisa's desk.
And to further frame that, the goal is to focus solely on the town portion, and not to expand into the county portion. And the master plan is a joint town and county plan, and I think that we need some more horsepower behind the town portion to catch up. And that's the impetus for forming this group.
So I think we've had a lot of discussion here, and I'm ready to go forward to make a motion to direct the attorney to draft up a resolution if we're good to go there.
Trustee Harper, one more note before we proceed.
Yeah, I have so are we getting recommended by our town administrator? Is this the recommendation of our staff and town administrator that we move forward with a new committee that's in a lot of ways redundant to an existing one?
Trustee Lashley, could you step in and respond before we ask Administrator Ryder?
I think it's much more than just a recommendation from our Administrator Ryder. This is a recommendation that I think both of the former members of the Planning Commission, town staff members, Administrator Ryder, and our planner Lisa Adair are in support of, and I would bet that we have the support of a lot of our board members, it sounds like, as well. I think this is extra help to make sure that this really important document gets the attention that it deserves and has the chance to be a really great document instead of just a revision, is what it sounds like we should we should be considering here.
Sounds like you're ready to make a motion.
Actually, I just would need informal direction to proceed with drafting a resolution to form the committee that would be heard and voted on next meeting. So just informal direction would be fine from at least 4 of you.
I'm absolutely in support of that, Attorney Cosnick.
I do want to hear everyone's concerns out before we move forward, and Trustee Harper is still trying to express concerns. I understand that we want to expedite, all of our conversations, but I think this is valid. So Trustee Harper, please continue.
Well, I am, and I think it's our job to provide those checks and balances for one another and to put our opinions out there on the table. It was very honorable of you to step down away from the post from the Planning Commission, but now you want to chair a brand new one with you at the helm. Does Town Administrator Ryder want to chair this?
Trustee Harper, this group will sit below Planner Adair, who is working on behalf of the Planning Commission, who is working on behalf of the town and county. So I don't see what issue you're raising here. And yes, I do want to chair this. And I don't think that asking Administrator Ryder to chair a committee over Planner Adair that's under Planner Adair makes much sense. But thank you.
Okay.
So I would like to just gauge general consensus. Are we as a group feeling comfortable giving Attorney Cosnick direction to draft an ordinance for us to, to draft an ordinance for us to create this group?
Wouldn't it be a resolution?
Or a resolution, yes, sorry.
That's correct, a resolution. And so far I've heard that the suggestion might be like to see maybe 5 members, 3, one planning commission, 1 trustee that is on the planning commission, 1 trustee that's not on the planning commission, and then the other 2 appointed by the commission. Is that kind of the general consensus for drafting something?
That sounds good to me.
If I may throw something out there, I'm hearing, both all sides of concern here, and I appreciate them all. I mean, is it possible just to form a simple working group supporting Planner Adair without necessarily having the formation of a formal committee and a formal chair? What I'd like out of all of this is to get some creative minds behind Lisa and a working group that would be a working group where she needs actual help to get things done. That's what I would like to see as the administrator. How it's formed and is not as important to me as what the group can do for her and what the group can do for the town and getting a good quality master plan document in place.
So if I understand this, the work.
Sorry, Trustee Wiegert. Trustee Barilla had her hand up. If Trustee Barilla, please go ahead.
I do like what Administrator Ryder says moving forward. I think just a working group, so that way we're not taking control or taking over anything else. It's just assistance to get Planner Adair to a point where she can move forward, and then we can revisit it. I really like that idea. Thank you, Administrator Ryder.
Trustee Wiegert. Administrator Ryder, does a working group have sufficient ability to do things similar to what the Kendall Committee has done in terms of hosting visioning sessions and community engagement and having the ability to put something in the newspaper and things of that nature without having to come back to the town trustees for every incremental step?
Well, I think the working group would be, providing recommendation to Director Adair, who would have that ability.
So it'd be similar in scope to the Master Planning Committee for Kendall?
I think so. I defer to Paul on that one. I mean, if we're making recommendations as a working group to Director Adair and she's accepting those recommendations, and those recommendations are an occasional as necessary or as appropriate public sessioning how could that work?
Well, first of all, with the working group, I'm unsure, unless you do it like your budget working group where just everybody's invited, how you are going to identify who's part of the group. I mean, you still need to take some kind of formal action to do that. As far as providing recommendation to Planner Adair, I mean, that could be something that the board decides as a group that, hey, yeah, this group can provide recommendation directly to Adair if it chooses. So that would be an option.
It sounds like a working group creates complications. Trustee Harper?
I would support Town Administrator Ryder's suggestion of a working group.
It sounded like Attorney Kosnick had some questions about that. It would be much clearer to have a committee. Is that not the case? Am I misconstruing your words, Attorney Kosnick?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that, Paul, would you like to?
I was just saying from a practical perspective, if you have a working group, who's on that working group?
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I think that having a formal committee drafted through resolution is where we're going because of all the questions that we have here so far. I think that a working group is not going to substantially alleviate the concerns that trustees have brought up here. So I think we need to have a formal resolution drafted for a committee.
I think we've heard opinions from everyone that wanted input, and other than Trustee Harper, it sounds like everyone's comfortable with the committee. We're not making a decision at this moment, but I would like to ask Attorney Kosnick to move forward with drafting a resolution to create this committee, as you previously described, with 3 members of the trustees, one of which is a representative from the Planning Commission, and 2 members at large from the community selected by the 3 trustee members.
And do I have a general consensus of 4 trustees? Did you just raise your hand if you support that? Okay, thank you.
So moving on to committee appointments. In addition to ratifying or voting on the committee appointments as included in the spreadsheet, and please don't shoot the messenger, Trustee Harper, I know we just disagreed on something, but it's been raised to my attention by a handful of people that all of us have either 3 or 4 appointments, and those that have 4 are fairly spread out between the more time-consuming appointments, except yourself. You're on 3 of the more heavy-hitting, at least as we anticipate, committees, including the Planning Commission, the Finance Committee, and the Ordinance and Personnel Committee, as the more time-consuming ones, as well as Public Utilities, which John Seitz has suggested is going to be a pretty time-consuming committee coming up. And it's been requested that you consider stepping down from one of those 3 committees, the Ordinance and Personnel, Finance, or Planning Commission. And that Mayor Pro Tem Barney, who is on 3 of the, actually only 2 committee, well, 3 of the less time commitment related committees, be appointed to whichever committee you're comfortable stepping down from. Trustee Harper.
Number 1, I'd like to know who brought this up. And number 2, I can dedicate myself. I have the time, I have the desire to do it. I want to give back. And this is how I want to do it.
I appreciate that. Trustee Barney, or Mayor Pro Tem Barney, was one of the people that raised that. There was also a community member who I do not have their consent to to name that raised this after our planning meeting that was attended. And I also expressed some concern. You mentioned to me in an email that your plate is very full between all of your other commitments. And the goal here with splitting these up is not to remove responsibility from you, but to allocate each of us so that we can make as much progress on behalf of the town as possible. And that is a lot of work to be a participating member in the Planning Commission, Finance, and the town ordinance and personnel committees. And I also would be concerned about any one of us serving on all three of those committees. This was not, as I said before, intended to single you out as being Trustee Harper.
I feel singled out right now.
Well, you volunteered for nearly everything.
I believe everyone else did too. Mayor Pro Tem Barney's on 4 different ones.
She's not. She's on 3. She's on.
Is the
She's on Building and Grounds, Parks, Rec, and Events, and Kendall. All 3 are similar and overlapping.
I apologize. It's Trustee Lashley. I apologize.
You're right, and I did reference that multiple people are on 4, but Trustee Lashley is on Public Safety, which historically is met once a year, Public Utilities, which you're also on, Finance, and the Zoning Board of Adjustments, which has only met once or twice in the last year. And again, I'm not suggesting that Trustee Lashley step down from one of those, because those are not 3 of our most significant committees. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. Just as a note too, I was concerned for everybody. I think there were a few of us in this boat at our work session, and I think I offered to switch with somebody. I can't remember exactly what the details of that switch were, so that we could more fairly kind of distribute the workload. So I mean, I definitely see the concerns that are raised with having too many of these heavy hitting committees on there. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about it though, if somebody wants to undertake that workload either.
Trustee Barella.
I guess I have something written down differently for Finance. I had you, Mayor Furman, on there, not Trustee Lashley, so I saw that that's changed. And then it was me, Trustee Lashley, that said that you could take over Public Utilities, because I know we have such a big issue coming down with the sewer system, and you and I are probably the only 2 truly apprised of what's going on. So I stepped off of that one to make room for you, to make sure that you were appropriately spread out. But I'm sorry, I see no problem doing all of these if you want to do them. I mean, I've been on 11 boards concurrently. So I don't understand, if you can handle the workload, you can handle it. If you don't, you don't. I can say I've probably only ever missed, in 2 years on 11 boards, I've only ever missed 2 meetings. So, because that's my dedication. So I think it's up to the individual, personally. Don't know.
So that we're all looking at the right spreadsheet, page 15 of our meeting packet has the appointments that we shared at the end of the work session.
Is
that what
there
you're looking at now, Trustee Barella?
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. But when we went over it right there at the end, I had Shane for Finance, Barella and Harper, and then I don't know how it changed to Trustee Lashley, because then I had Ordinance and Personnel. I had Mayor Furman. Trustee
So Trustee Barella, let me cut you off. There's no need to go over those again. These ones we had, noted by town staff and myself, and there were no discrepancies. This was the one that's in the packet was how the conversation concluded. So I don't think we need to go through any other discrepancies. Trustee Wiegert.
I'm just gonna echo what Trustee Barella was saying. Trustee Harper, excuse me. I mean, you're giving him fair warning. I trust the guy. He's responsible. adult gentleman. If he wants to take on the work, then I don't think we should try to discourage him from that. I think fair warning is enough, and he knows what he's getting himself into. So I don't think we should try to really be changing people's minds here, as long as they know what they're getting into.
Even if we're underutilizing other people. Trustee Wiegert?
It's just a matter of opinion there.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yeah, this just came to my attention because I looked back at the spreadsheet and realized that I would like to serve and dedicate a lot of time to town, but I don't feel like I have I don't feel like I can be quite as gung-ho as Mr. Harper maybe, but I also was only on the two of the committees where, like, not including the bottom up part of the spreadsheet committees, the ones on the top part of the spreadsheet, so that I think we were supposed to select or be appointed to 3 of those, and I just noticed I was on 2. So that's where that originated. And they're very overlapping and not as significant maybe as some of the others.
I would only point out, Mayor Pro Tem, that you're also on the Kendall Committee, which makes a 3rd, and that's a big one. Don't forget about that one.
Yeah, no, don't worry. That one is in my forefront.
Well, I suppose we just need to make a decision here as to whether or not we keep them as is, or if we need to vote on this, an alteration to the appointments. Like I said, I'm acting as moderator in this case, so please let me know what you guys think. Trustee Lashley.
Thanks, Mayor Furman. Yeah, I think it was a valid point to bring up in the discussion, and we brought it up for sure before we kind of codify this and set it in stone. But I think if Trustee Harper feels that he's well spread out and has the time to dedicate to these different appointments, and Mayor Pro Tem Barney doesn't feel slighted by only having the Kendall Rec committee as her main time commitment, I'm in favor of the way that things stand so far.
Trustee Brella.
So do we need a motion? If so, I make a motion to.
Trustee Wiegert had his hand up before you complete that motion.
Okay.
Trustee Wiegert.
A second.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
There we go.
finish my motion then. I move to accept the committee panel as per the packet.
Kelly, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Barla,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Wager,
Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee Lashley,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Thank you all. And when things like this come up, I plan to facilitate the conversation, and I hope that everyone will engage in those conversations like we did just now. So thank you. Trustee Brella.
I guess I have an issue. I am not a big person for reading the very first page of the agenda, honestly, because it's the content behind it that makes more of a difference. And I didn't realize that you guys had changed up the way a meeting is formed, that trustees reports are now before staff reports and continued business. So when did that format change, or was it just this meeting, or was this officially adopted as a change? Because that's why I went out of turn about the staff
Administrator Ryder?
report.
Well, I can honestly tell you there was no intention or any reason behind it, so I'll just call it a mistake that it went out of historical order.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just, we'd always done it previously, I thought, with the staff reports early on to make sure that staff didn't have to sit there through the whole entire meeting if they didn't need to. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, it might have been a carryover from the one. We had a weird meeting in there where we had to adopt ordinances to do things virtually and it got screwed up. So I suspect that it was a carryover, and we'll fix that for the next time and put it back in its traditional spot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, moving on to staff reports.
We typically just ask the board if they have any questions or comments on anything the staff is doing, and we'll entertain those questions.
Just wanted to comment, I think the staff is doing a great job. I see a lot of due diligence in here to receive the reimbursements for our grants and whatnot, and just ensure that the town is receiving every dollar that's owed. So I'd just like to commend the staff here. You guys are doing a great job. Let's keep up the hard work and push through this crisis that we're in, and hopefully we can get to where we're bringing some money back into town.
On behalf of the staff, Trustee Uyghur, thank you. Thank you. They are all working incredibly hard with stuff obviously none of us have ever dealt with in regards to the COVID and what it's bringing. Appreciate it.
Trustee Barilla.
My question is for Administrator Ryder, continue to close out the 2019 financials and prepare for the audit. Do we have an audit date?
We do. I was successful in deferring it, first of all, to September 2019 for two reasons. One, it would have been nearly impossible to prepare the audit work papers, and we would have had to call in the independent auditor or the independent accountant that we've used in the past at great cost. This will give me a chance, hopefully a chance to apply my experience and do these work papers internally. And two, it pushed off the $9,000 fee, for several months, which was advantageous financially.
Great, thank you.
So I would say at this point, it's there, we're picking at it. We still continue to review and we find things in 2020 that belong in 2019. So it's not an all-out assault by any means on the audit work papers at this point. It's a continuing process that when we find something, we fix it, and it will help us in preparation for the ultimate audit.
Thank you. In Todd Bove's staff report, he included topics for continued staff Board of Trustee discussion as Mullis Lake and 4th of July. Are those things that are conversations for this evening? And
4th of July, no. I was reminded today by Trustee Barilla, who sits on the 4th of July committee, that we had discussed their approach a little while ago, and that they've already decided, the 4th is probably not, is definitely not doable as a date. Mullis Lake is going to be interesting. It's not for discussion tonight. We had a lengthy discussion today about a number of park and rec projects, maybe the main one being Mullis Lake and the timing of its opening. There are some preparatory work. Some of it's, mildly costly, cleaning out the septic tank, etc. Some of these things have lead time. So as I categorize it, we are now on the tightrope. Do you do it to prepare, or you don't do it to save the money or defer the money spent? One going for it would be committing to the fact that we're going to open soon. Soon meaning, sometime in the next month or month and a half. And we want to be prepared for that. Not going for it, making the decision that we're not going to have much of a summer, and perhaps Mullis remains closed because of social distancing. Right now, we're headed toward a path of get prepared. But as the big population centers open up and states like Georgia go full out committed, what does that mean? In 2 weeks, a month, is this thing reignited and we're back on lockdown for the rest of the summer? That's a horrible situation to think of, but it's possible. The other possibility is the southern states, we use them as a litmus test. They open up, they go full bore. They don't see a critical increase or an unmanageable increase in COVID cases. And we all take some stock in that and say, okay, we can now start to open up strategically, maybe not as aggressively as they are. So then we interpolate that down to what does it mean for Silverton and our facilities. So the message to Todd is, let's prepare a plan like Bill McDougall did for construction assisting the OEM just recently. Let's prepare a plan of how we would operate this thing under the current PHO, or perhaps the PHO that's about to come out this week. And the positive tact would be that if we get the OEM and Becky Joyce to accept that operational plan under this week's issued PHO, and the PHOs get less and less, then we got a good plan to operate, and we can always adjust. So, some of the things are, do we operate at 50% capacity, basically going every other campsite is available to keep distance? How do we check people at the door and give them the instructions for social distancing, wearing masks, don't congregate 7 or less? So Todd's putting together that plan. We'll present it to Becky at some point to say, is this something that's workable? And if it is, then we come to the Board of Trustees for the ultimate approval, as this is how we'd like to open and operate Mullis when the time is appropriate, and make sure you're either approving that or at least on board with it. So that's what Todd is working on, and meaning in that comment.
Thank you. Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Ryder. Those are great updates, and I'm happy to hear that we've got a plan going on, because we know that this thing is not going away. This is the new normal. We're going to have to figure out how we operate with the business of this virus. And it's going to take social distancing. It's going to take radical ideas. And that's why I'm glad that we have great people like Mr. Bove and Administrator Ryder working on this, because it's going to take some forward thinking. And we're going to have to do things like, social distancing. We may have to leave every other camp spot vacant, just like you said there, Mr. Ryder. I think somebody said it earlier, but I'm not going to discount it. Why don't we close down Green Street and get picnic tables out there, or get more tables and chairs, and allow restaurants to operate with appropriate social distancing? This is where we're at in this time, and this is how it's got to be, unfortunately. And to just say, no, we're not going to operate, we're not going to allow people to make a living, that's not right. We can do things here, we can operate safely, we can reduce the risk, and we can still allow people to make a living and have businesses here. So I appreciate you guys' forward thinking, and let's keep moving forward with these plans. I like where we're headed.
Thank you again, Trustee Wiegert. You're absolutely right. This is the new norm, and this is how we responsibly and strategically open and stay open in the new norm. We don't want to get cavalier and force another shutdown. And we're doing all this, just so the board knows, working closely. I'm on every, recovery team, OEM, every committee there is, so there's a group that's working really strategically together to bounce this all off each other, to make sure there's a collaborative effort that we're going to do it the right way, and creatively in some cases.
Trustee Barilla.
I know we're not going to really discuss the 4th of July, but we do have a plan that by May 15th, we're pretty much going to call it. The carnival's already been called. Just trying to see, when the opening timeline, just like Mr. Ryder said, if all of a sudden the southern states show that we have this big upswing, we know we're going to be tamped down on again. So May 15th was our kind of official date to completely call it. just so everybody's aware, that's what the upper board has kind of talked about. And it just kind of like the Hard Rock 100, you're just kind of hanging on that thin line, whether or not you're going to move forward or you're just going to just say everything's off. But Administrator Ryder a couple meetings ago had actually put forth a potential, like, what do we do when this is over celebration? And we could move some of those activities that we planned for the 4th to say that time. So just to give an update, that's kind of where we're sitting at. But I would not recommend town invest in anything. Let's not bring in any porta potties. Let's not do anything for the actual day of the 4th. Because if we do have a few fireworks, it'll just be for our locals. So just saying.
Thank you, Trustee Barella. Is there anything else during the staff report section that anyone would like to discuss? Okay. Moving along to the new business section. We have one item, which is consideration to approve the renewal of the retail marijuana license for the Acme Healing Center of Silverton, doing business as Mountain Annie's. Trustee Barella? You're muted.
Sorry, it's my iPad. I have a little harder time with this. Administrator Ryder, do we know, or Attorney Kosnick, do we know that the other issue that they had with like a dual state licensing, did that get resolved?
It is funny you bring that up because Trustee Kosnick caught in a submission in the package, there was an assignment of a lease, and the assignment went through several organizations and did not ultimately wind up with Acme Healing Center LLC, which is the licensee. We contacted, Paul contacted their attorney. Kelly contacted the applicant and said, you guys have a situation here that is not going to lead to approval. I would see if Attorney Kosnick got that documentation today, and or Kelly. I didn't see anything.
So I have not got the documentation. The concern was that part of the regulations, just like with a liquor license, the applicant has to show that they are in full possession of the premises for the period of the license. What was received by the town was a assignment of the lease to a different entity, not the same entity that's the applicant. So that's where the problem was on Friday. When we saw that, we tried to contact the attorney for the applicant. I've not received a response. I did receive a call today from the landlord. The landlord did believe that a lease was in place, but was not able to get to his office to check and to verify that.
So without proper documentation, is the recommendation to deny or to stay this for the next meeting and ask them to see if they can get their documentation in order?
So I don't believe that this was scheduled for a public hearing, so the board would not be able to deny this today. It would be able to continue this. Currently, with the materials submitted to the town, there's not a showing that they would be in compliance with the state regulations. So I think, without being able to show that they're in compliance, the suggestion from staff would likely be to continue it.
Trustee Wiegert?
I'd like to make a motion that we table the consideration for renewal of the retail marijuana license for Acme Healing Company of Silverton, doing business as Mountain Annie's.
Second.
Kelly, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Weigert?
Yes.
Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Trustee Lashley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. We will now open the meeting up to public comment. If anyone who's tuned in has a comment or question, please click the raise your hand button within Zoom, and we'll give you a couple seconds. It doesn't look like anyone is planning to comment, in which case I would entertain a motion to enter executive session. But I would like to note before we do that, for any public that is on the call, you will be exited out of this meeting, and you are welcome to join at the end of the executive session once that's concluded. But the only thing that we'll be doing following the executive session is adjourning the meeting. So it may not be worth your time to stick around. Trustee Harper, did you have a question?
I do. I want to say something before we go into executive meeting. Mayor Furman, I want to thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank Administrator Ryder, Attorney Kosnick, Planner Dyer, all of our trustees for the healthy dialogue, the debate. That's what we're up here to do. And in all sincerity, Mayor Furman, I thank you for the exchange of ideas and thoughts. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well. I appreciate that. And with that, I would entertain a motion to Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we move into executive session.
And I believe that this one we have to be kind of specific about. And so I'll feed you the.
Okay, I'll read it
The
there.
motion.
For the purpose
Okay.
of determining positions relative to the matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and/or instructing negotiators under CRS section 24-6-402 4E concerning Silverton Lakes wetland and mitigation.
I would just add to that, and for specific legal advice under section 24-6-402 4B.
And I'll still
Mr. Kosnick.
And Trustee Brill, that was a second.
Yep.
Wonderful. And all in favor? Please have the record show that everyone raised their hand. It was unanimous.
So recorded.
Great. So thank you all for the public for attending at this time. Lisa will be switching the Zoom meeting to be the board only. And we'll
Bear
take
with
a
me.
quick break while she takes care of this.
Yeah,
If
bear
anybody- yeah,
with
if
me for
anybody-
just a few minutes, trustees, while I shut down the live stream. We'll hand over control of the meeting to Trustee Ryder, and I will take myself out of the equation, as will Kelly.
Well, it was good to see your face.